Bawal. Bawal. Ilagay ko na hindi na lang.
Ay, mayroon ng isang milyones. Ilapag mo na ang iyong bahay. Ano ba itong kamera ko? Nahuhulog.
Hence the reason I just got a few minutes ago, and I wanted to tell you, you would
Bindang. Kayong dalawa talaga. Ako talaga pag ako nagalit.
Pa-shout out nga pala ako kay yung isa kong kababayan si Abits TV. Shout out sa iyo. Abits TV. Ayun na ha, sina-shout out na kita. Sana makabisita ka. Merong isang milyones. Nasaan ka na? Ka na? Maglapag-lapag ka na dyan.
Even though I have a lot of projects that I need to start inside.
Hi sa'yo, Bibi Nona. Hello. Hello sa'yo, Bibi Nona. Tamsak, salamat. Salamat sa pagdalaw. Tamsak dan po. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And then I'm going to start building into the soil is added. Now,
Hi sa'yo, Lilis. Happiness.
this is what you would normally
Good evening sa'yo.
see of this.
Maglapag na kayo ng bahay nyo. At bibigyan ko na kayo ng jacket.
Now, that is normally what you would put as a topper.
Ayan na, Bibi. Mayroon ka ng jacket. Ikaw din, Lili. Mayroon na.
Right here. And it also helps with the rains and keep the splatter of the mud.
Lilis, happiness.
Wall or whatever you have sitting. But it also is what
Ayan na, lapag-lapag na kayo. You're welcome din sa'yo.
to your soil and your plants.
Welcome, welcome.
I need to clean this up. This still has remnants of construction.
You're welcome.
Rock inside here. Well, this was
Ayan na, naglapag na ng bahay si Lilis, happiness. Puntahan mo na, Bibi Nona.
take it and they get the fine sand and they dump the bigger rocks and dump it in another place because that's not what they use. They can't use that with the big rocks.
Magdikit-dikit lang kayo.
I need to clean this up a little bit and then get the shovel on and add them inside there and make this.
Maya-maya dadating na yung ating mga
all these plants that are already
kaibigan.
pull them up and replant them.
Ayan na, nagbaba na siya ng bahay si Bibi Nona. Magtamsak-tamsak na kayo dyan. Oh. Salamat sa pagbisita ha. Mga kapatid. Salamat, salamat.
I can't tell you how concerned I am about working underneath this coconut tree. There's a bunch of those mature coconuts and a lot of them that are falling. I don't want to hit the nail not anymore. But I'm going to go
Bibi
in-
Nona, pasukli daw, sabi ni Lilis, happiness.
as I do winning the lottery.
Oy, good evening sa'yo. Iprina Sabihon.
You know, Murphy's Law. So I've been trying to.
Sukli daw po. Sabi ni ni Lilis, ano ba yun?
I had an idea. I was throwing around.
Ni Lilis Happiness. Dan na daw, sabi ni Bibi Nona. Lilis, ano na daw? Dan na daw, sabi ni Bibi Nona.
I want gun, but I don't want a gun right now. The property, that's not sneaking. But the thing is, it threatens
4 milyones na tayo.
retaining wall.
Maglapag ka na ng bahay mo dyan, kung sino ka man. Salamat sa pagdalaw. Salamat sa pagtamsak kay host.
Garden area, the driveway. Of course, when you have typhoons and things like that, even with any of the banding them from the any sign of the stop, I think will be fine. Then what I'll do, after it gets to maybe 2 meters, 3 meters tall, 4 meters tall, higher than my
Sabi ni Lilis Happiness, dikit-dikit daw Iprina. Ilapag mo daw yung iyong tahanan at didikitan na nila.
Now the question is,
Ay, sorry.
which one am I doing? I want to transplant to the plant. Now, this seedling right here, this is not from.
Iprina Sabihon, maglapag ka daw ng bahay, sabi ni Lilis Happiness. At dikit-dikitan ka daw niya.
Coconut seedling up there. Let's look at what else we have right here.
Pa-shoutout ako sa aking kababayan na si Abits TV. Sana makabisita ka minsan sa aking tahanan.
The most mature, I got some more meal. Right there.
Umalis na sila. Bakas at kalimbang tayo mga sis para di tayo mapalo ni Lolo. Tama talaga yan Lilis Happiness. Dapat talaga magbakas, magkalimbang para di tayo mga lagas. Kasi pag hindi natin gawin yon, lagas, malalagas tayo.
And I still have to pull them out of the ground, but I can check and see if there's still any containers. That's probably why.
Dikit na ba kita, Lilis Happiness? Tika lang ha.
Because this island is
Tignan
going
ko.
to stay. This island is going to stay. The Baikupo will always be there as long as a typhoon doesn't let it up and take it away. And remember, this is going to be the fourth one. And it would look so neat from the lanai up there. And looking back in and seeing the two big coconuts. So of course, they got one of the small seedlings. It'll even be easier for me to dig up and then we'll transplant it.
Tingnan ko nga kung
Now you know why I put all of those
Ay, dikit na
seedlings
kita.
in those containers just like that, so that it would be easy to
Dikit na
calculate.
kita.
Well, we're going to put it up there, but we're going to take it out of the container. Then we should see accelerated growth over the next couple of years. So it's not restricted inside that container. So let's go ahead and move.
wala
this.
pa ako mga banana ngayon bago pa lang kasi ako Ay, tapos na daw si Iprina, sabihon kay Bibi Nona.
All right, now it's time to find dead center and to prepare the hole in the soil so the coconut tree stays.
Oo, dikit na nga tayo eh. Tinignan ko kasi dikit na tayo. Ayan, naglapag ulit si Lilis Happiness ng kanyang tahanan. Ang sabi ni Pray na sabihon, tapos na ako, dikit na bibino na. Tatlong milyones tayo.
So, my prediction is this time next year, it's about 1 meter on the tallest maples on there right now. I predict by this time next
Salamat
year,
guys ha sa pagbisita nyo.
I expect it'll be 2.5 meters.
Maraming salamat.
I hit every single obstacle you could possibly hit. I need to get out from under this coconut tree because with all the obstacles I had there, the odds of me hitting those means the odds might be that the coconut might fall from the tree. So I hit roots. Remember the mahogany trees that used to be there?
3 milyones.
Mahogany roots. Of course, this coconut tree. You know,
Salamat, salamat.
there are thousands of
Taga saan ka?
coconut
Taga
trees.
Kuan, taga Buhol, Bisayang Dako.
Very center where I wanted to plant this tree. I had a mini boulder down there. This one right over here.
Ikaw ano, Lilis, taga saan ka?
It was a challenge to try to dig.
Taga ano ko, taga Buhol ko.
I didn't know how big that boulder was. But I was able to get that. And then
Parehas tayo.
not only-
Sa asa mo sa Buhol dapit? Bisdak da ita. Oh, bisdak kinabisdakan.
Red ants everywhere. I got more bites on my feet than a lamb chop and a crocodile pit.
Taga ako, taga Kuan ko, taga Bagtik, Katigbian.
Plenty of this around this spega and stuff.
Ikaw asa inyo ha?
I just got so many bites. So we're going, get some lunch, get hydrated, and back out here again.
Tapos na nako magdikit ni Lilis Happiness. Tapos na daw si Ibrina sabiyon magdikit sa'yo. Lilis Happiness. Ay, Papa, did you already take your medicine? Dili ko taga Bohol, Hos, Manila ko, pero ako na ba na taga Cebu. Mao kabalo na ko magbisaya, Hos.
But wouldn't you know it, right as I started getting back into work in the garden, right after
Ako,
lunch,
kuan, kana na ang taga Bohol, pero nami nagpuyo dire sa
really,
Bulacan.
it's slowing down a lot right now. But it's that normal afternoon kind of shower that we haven't gotten for a
Na ako sa Bulacan nagpuyo.
over the last few days. Which means I am
Asa mo nagpuyo dire sa kuan, Manila?
over there. So maybe I can work on a few things on the inside. So
Lilis
it's
Happiness.
not a full
Sa,
wash.
asaan kayo dito sa ano, Manila? Sabi ni Eprina Lilis, sa asa daw sa kuan sa Cebu mo. Kani si Eprina sabihon kay taga Cebu mo guni sila. Sa Tagig mo layo di ay nare. Bulacan man mi.
All right, change out the sensors. I will give it 24 hours to soak on, seal around the connections that we can see.
Tagig kami, Hos.
That's how the way, well, it was in here, the rain stopped. Like gardeners.
Eastern Bisaya po. Eastern Bisaya po.
We work side by side
Mm.
in that garden.
Kami di ame sa kuan Bulacan nagpuyo.
That's about it for me, folks. I am.
Diri man ko nagkuan, diri ko nakapalit og balay sa Bulacan.
Now some of this is sweating. Some of it is
Ako Bisayang dako. Tapos karing ahong bana mo ay Amerikano.
I need a rake. I need one of those hard rakes. I haven't seen those around here.
Kuan ko no,
I'm gonna run to it.
ipri na sabihon, ilapag mo daw yung ano mo,
I've been getting texts.
yung tahanan.
It's like the last 3 weeks, Ace is having a sale. It's a big sale for 31, 1, and 2 September.
Oy, 3 milyones tayo, guys.
So, it's like 10% off, and if you have a some advantage card, you get an additional 10%. So it's 20%. It's big. It's a big deal for them. And I think maybe the sales.
Ano, wow, sana all char.
I saw my name. Well, anyway,
Bakit?
the salesperson in Honeywell area was next for the key organizer. I stopped by there a couple of weeks ago. I've been getting text messages from him every 3 days. And I told him, I told him I will stop by when you have the sale. I will stop by. Then he calls me up on the phone today. He said,
Sana all daw, sana all char.
And I told him, I said, yeah, I think I'm just going to do some work here. And I'll be there.
Tingnan ko nga yung ano mo.
And I'm really tired.
Nako, ayan na naman si sabihon, no? Hindi pwede yan, mapakul ako niyang ano mo.
Anyway, my dad always told me a man is
Burahin ko yung sinabi mo kasi
and I live by a lot of the words of my dad. So, and I
kain
really-
tayo ninyo, guys.
says something
O sige, katatapos lang namin kumain.
I'm gonna go get a shower, run down there. I'm not gonna bring the camera down there tonight, so I'm gonna close here. So I'm just picking up a couple.
Sus kay, di man mapindot ning ahong.
So, a good day. Fix that. I hope I fix that plumbing issue.
Kadto bitaw imong gisuwat ipre na bawal to. Malaglag ang ahong balay anang kalakiha. Gamay pa lang ako ang balay host. Kay bag-o pa lang ko. Ah, pareha gud ta. Gamay pa man pud ahong balay. Kuan lang ta kanang lipay-lipay lang ta. Manam di man ni siya nako makuan. Oh, honggi, aho anggi kuan kay na malagasan ko. Malagas. Bawal to nga kuan imong gibutang. Dito pwede. Katong gisuwat bitaw nimo dito pwede. Makuanan ko. Masayang ra ang ahong kuan.
So if you enjoyed today's video, please give me a thumbs up. Please share, and if you have not subscribed,
Malagas ang ang kuan. Alam mo naman yan si Lolo na sus Ginoo. Kinaikmatag mata. Ikaw kuno ano ipre na sabihon kuan ko no kanan ang hingkalimbang ba kuno ka. Sabi ni ano ni Lily sa Pinis. Dapat sukli-sukli lang po ng maayos para dili tayo malagas ni Lolo. Mahirap na. Di man maklik ning imong kuan. Shout out sa iyo aking kababayan na si Abits TV. Sukli rata haha kay parang tabang tas sa usahihi. Labig liter lagi nang imong bawal ra ba nang dagkong litra day. Ako ning ang irison ha kay na makuanta ni kanang dakong litra di na pwede. Pati ng mga emoji ana di gyapon na pwede. I-remove na ikuan ako ning imong kuan kay naay dakong litra. Na wa kuno kasabot. Mao kay kuan na ibaw kan lulo na matusok ta ni lulo. Okay lang oy. Ganyan din ako dati. Pareho naman tayo magkaano. Ganyan din ako. Si kuan kuno lilis happiness si iprina kuno siya kasabot ug sa kalimbang. Ay Ginoo ko. Oh, sige kaunsa ka. Balik lang unya kay magsigmanuo puto unya tong akong mga amiga. Pagkuan laman, pag butang daan og balay para musod sila, masudlan kanila. Madikitan kanila. Ay, 4 na milyones na tayo. Salamat sa pagbisita.
Kasabot na sa kalimbang.
Ay, Ginoo ko. Wa jud taon kuno siya kasabot ug sa kalimbang. Si Jara gani po hing istorya og mao nay buhaton ngani diwa siya kasabot sa kalimbang. Kananang gilid ba imo nang kiling-kilingon. Di man gud pwede gi istorya aning kuan kay masungkit ani lulo. Imo ha kuno ang akiling-kilingon. Mauba. Ano ba naman tong... Yan.
Angel Fire East, cassette 7.
Ay, 3 milyones.
The demons bundled Bennett Scott into her parka and took her out of the house and into the night, letting the drugs in her system do the job of keeping her in line. Snow was flying in all directions, the wind was blowing hard, and it was so cold that nose hairs froze. But Bennett Scott was floating somewhere outside her body,
Tanawa, oh.
barely aware of anything
Maya na.
but the pleasant
Kasi gamitin ko kasi yan pag ano.
connected to reality. Every so often, something around her would come sharply into focus. The bite of the wind, the white fury of the snow, the skeletal shadow of a crooked tree limb, or the faces of Thindo Gas and Penny Dreadful, one on either side, propping her up.
Nakatawag mo raman to gubog to si...
But mostly, there was only a
Ah,
low
no,
buzz
nam
in
tan
her
ah.
ears and a wondrous sense of peace. Thindo Gas had left everything in the house as he found it, closing the front door behind them without locking it. He wanted Nest Freemark to return home without suspicion.
Andyan ka pa ba, ano, Eprina?
So he'd been careful not to do anything that would scare her off. If she grew too cautious, it would spoil the surprise he had left for her. With Penny laughing and talking non-stop, they climbed into the car, backed out of the driveway onto Woodlawn, drove to the park entrance, parked in front of the crossbar, and set off on foot. Mississippi Park was a black hole, cold and sleek. The darkness unbroken and endless across the flats and through the woods. The snow freezing to ice in the grip of the north wind howling up the river channel. The lights that normally lit the road.
2 milyones tayo, guys.
Power line went down, and the curtain of blowing snow masked the pale glimmerings of the nearby residences and town halls. Tonight, the park might as well have been on the moon. Bennett Scott stumbled and mushed through the deepening snowdrifts, her feet dragging, her body listless, her progress made possible by the fact that the demons who clutched either arm were dragging her. She gulped blasts of frigid air for breath and ducked her head for warmth, automatic responses from her body. But her mind told her almost nothing of what she was doing. She remembered Penny being there, the sharing of drugs that gave her such relief, and the thin, tenuous thread of hope she clung to, that somehow, someday, she would find her way back to Harper. Now and again, she would hear her daughter's voice calling to her, small words, little noises, bits and pieces of memories retrieved from the haze of her thoughts. She saw nothing of the eyes that began to appear in the dark, bright pairs of yellow slits
2 milyones tayo guys. Lapag-lapag na.
Alisin mo kasi yung show, ayun, sinilas mo. Yan, tabi-tabi ka. Tabi-tabi ka.
Kaming lang, 2 milyones. Kaming lang guys.
Papasok ka ba?
2 milyones po tayo. Alam nyo guys, tinatawanan ako ng asawa ko. He laughing to me. 3 milyones, 3 milyones.
Then continue west past the Indian Mounds to the turnaround and the cliffs. The road had disappeared in the snow, and the entire area was a white carpet beneath the ragged limbs of the leafless hardwoods.
Shout out naman dyan kay Atoy.
Interrupted. There was no one else in the park.
Atoy, tsaka kay kay Abits TV.
Toward the cliff
Sana minsan makadalaw kayo sa aking tahanan.
from the drop. The feeders pressed closer, eager to become involved. Let her go, Penny, Cass ordered. They stepped back from Bennett, leaving her alone at the cliff's edge, facing out toward the river, her head lolling and her arms hanging loose.
Salamat sa'yo, Clouds Hunter TV. Tamsak na Dan.
Her voice
Salamat.
what they needed.
Maglapag ka na dyan at
Stood without moving.
anuhan ka na nila.
Gliding through valleys,
Madikitan ka na nila.
the land all white-edged and golden bright, the singing of her blood in her veins.
Ayun na, may jacket ka na.
She soared, unfettered for a long time, staring at nothing.
Salamat sa pagtamsak.
Suddenly, that she had not come alone. Penny, she managed. The wind howled at her. Penny? A child's voice called sharply. Mommy! Bennett lifted her head and peered into the snow and darkness. It was Harper. Mommy, can you hear me? Baby? Where are you, baby? Mommy, I need you. Please, Mommy. Bennett felt the cold suddenly, the taste of its bite ripping past the armor of her stupor, leaving her shaking and
Anong
breathing hard.
pilaknan, anam
She licked
na
her dry
naman.
lips and glanced around. She saw the eyes now, close and watchful.
Sige, ipasok mo na.
Jerked away in shock and fear. Harper! She screamed.
Maglapag ka na at para anuhan ka na, madikitan ka na.
Saw her daughter then, a faint image just ahead of her in the darkness, lit by a pale white light that brightened and faded with the beating of her own heart, with the pulsing of her blood. She saw Harper and reached for her, but Harper was already moving away. Harper, she wailed. She couldn't go to her, knew she couldn't. Knew there was something very wrong with trying to do so. She had a vague memory of having been in this situation once before, but she could not remember when or why. Mommy, Harper begged, stumbling as she retreated. Something was pulling at the little girl, dragging her away. Something dark and
O
shaky.
sige, pasok mo na. Ilapag mo na ang bahay mo, Cloud Center, para madikitan mo na rin sila.
Pressed against her, lunging after her daughter. She was close enough to touch Harper, to see the fear in her daughter's eyes, when the ground disappeared beneath her feet, and she fell away into the dark. Chapter 20. Robert Hepler pulled the big navigator into the empty driveway and put it in park, leaving the engine running. Nest gave a quick sigh of relief. It was blowing so hard that the driveway itself and all the traces of tire tracks that might have marked its location had long since disappeared. So it was a good thing he knew the way by heart, or they could easily have ended up in the front yard. She stared at the lighted windows of the house, but could see no movement. There were more lights on now.
Shout out ko sa akong mga igsuon diha sa Bulacan.
They're ahead of her.
Si Nining Nando, Tatang Makring ug Antaklong ug sa akong anak si Banji. Ingat kayo dyan. Salamat, 4 na milyones.
Robert asked. She shifted her eyes to meet his, and he gestured vaguely.
4 na milyones.
Make sure. She knew what he meant, even if he wasn't saying it straight out. No, I can handle this.
4 na milyones po tayo.
He shrugged. Anytime. Call if you need me. She opened the door into the shriek of the wind and climbed out, sinking in snow up to her knees. Criminy, this pig would say. Watch yourself driving home, Robert, she shouted at him. She got the children out of the back seat, small bundles of padded clothing and loose scarf ends, and began herding them toward the house. The wind whipped at them, shoving them this way and that as they trundled through its deep carpet. Heads
Hi sa'yo, Analisa
it was
Hilario.
Nest could feel it reach all the way down to her bones. She heard the rumble of the navigator
Hi,
as it
te
backed
friend.
up the driveway and turned up the road.
Tamsak
In
host.
seconds, the sound of
Hastang
the
TV,
engine
salamat.
faded into the wind's howl.
Bigyan na kitang jacket.
They clambered up the ice-rimmed wooden steps to the relative
Yan
shelter,
na, may jacket ka na.
where the children stamped their boots and brushed snow from their shoulders in mimicry of
Hastang
Nest.
TV, may jacket ka na.
The front door and found it unlocked, a sure sign someone was home, and ushered Harper
Ayun na.
inside. It was silent in the house.
Maglapag ka na ng bahay mo.
So silent.
Sabi ni Cloud TV, support po tayo daw.
No one else was there.
Salamat sa 6 na milyones.
She could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock and the rattle
Maglapag na kayo ng bahay, guys. Ikaw,
where the wind worked
Hastang TV, may ka na, binigyan na kita ng jacket
glanced down at
para
Tom's
makaano ka
bag,
na,
packed and sitting by the front door.
makalapag ka na ng inyong bahay.
Footprints that were not their own. Then she caught sight of
Ayan na, naglapag na po si Hastang TV. Sungkitin mo na, dikitan mo na yan, Clouds TV.
She felt a moment of incredible sorrow.
Tsaka meron pa dito dalawa, si Lily's Happiness.
On the entry
At tsaka
children
sino ba yung isa?
helping them off with their coats.
Naglapag ka ganina.
Harper's face was
Sa taas na
red
pala.
with cold and her eyes were tired.
Lily's TV.
Little John looked the way he always did,
At tsaka si Bibi Nona. Dikitan nyo na yan.
but he seemed
Mga
afraid,
legit yung mga yan.
as if the passing of time drained him of energy and life, and was finally beginning to leave its mark. She stopped in the middle of removing his coat, stared at him a moment, and then pulled him against her, hugging him close, trying to infuse
Dan na daw po, Hastang TV, si
Trying once again to break through.
Clouds TV.
Little John, she whispered. He did not break
Clouds
back.
TV, Dan po, sabi ni Hastang TV.
And curiosity and wonder were in his eyes.
Hi sa'yo, Laika Swerte.
Harper said at her elbow, touching her sleeve. Apple juice?
Hi din sa'yo, Angeline Hanuhan. Hanuhan, hello.
His coats and boots off.
Pa-shout out po. Hi sa'yo, Angeline Hanuhan. Angel Hanuhan.
Outside the car, wearing chains, rumbled down the snowy pavement. His passing
Huwag niyong kalimutang itamsak si host. At salamat pala sa pagdalaw.
as tree limbs swayed and shook amid the swirling snow. Nest stood by the door without moving, drawn by the sounds, wondering if Bennett had been foolish enough to go out. The pack
Clouds TV, sabi ni Hastang TV, dana daw po siya sa'yo. Balik-balik lang.
she invited, taking the
Hi kay Laika Swerte.
hallway to the kitchen. She glanced over her shoulder. It was dark in the back of the house.
Sabi ni Annalisa Kilario, hi Dolor.
Gaze shifted to the shadowy corners of the
Yahoo, sabi ni Clouds TV.
boards, way back under the Christmas tree, behind the presents. Then she looked ahead down the hall. The basement door.
Maglapag na kayo ng inyong mga bahay. 4 na milyones na tayo.
That door had been closed when she left. Would Bennett have gone down there for some reason?
Sungkit Tinoy na yan, yung nauna sa inyo. At babalikan kayo niyan.
Only the furnace room.
Ayun na, 5 milyones tayo. Salamat.
Outside, the wind gusted sharply, shaking the back door so hard the glass rattled. Nest started at the sound, releasing the children's hands.
Salamat sa pagtamsak kay host.
Gently shooing them into the kitchen. Standing by the doorway, she picked up the phone to call John Ross, but the line was dead. She put the receiver back in its cradle and looked again on the basement door. She was being silly. She
Salamat sa pagtamsak.
closed it without looking down the stairs and punched the button lock on the knob,
Sabi ni Clouds TV, hina daw yung kanyang knee.
contemplating her act. Surprised at how much better.
Nagkakamang daw yung kanyang knee.
Satisfied, she walked back into the kitchen.
6 na milyones. Salamat sa pagbisita.
Cookies were distributed. She took a moment to check out the
Hastang TV, nasungkit ka na daw. Sabi ni
she was. Nest returned to the kitchen, considering her options.
Clouds TV, nakasungkit na po. Sabi niya, Hastang TV, nakasungkit na po ako. Yun ang sabi niya.
She was sitting beside her and munching cookies with the children when the shriek of ripping or tearing of metal rose out of the bowels of the house. She heard the sound.
Sabi ni Prina Sabihon, tapos nagdikit na kita.
For a moment without
Okay, no problem. Good evening. Sabi ni Clouds TV, basta data, ang hina sa amin. Ha ha ha. Nagkamang. Hi sa'yo, Madam Alma. Salamat.
the day is gray.
Sa pagdalaw.
Light
6 na milyones na tayo, guys.
is morning, but the sun is only a spot of hazy brightness in the deeply overcast sky. The walls of
Thank you daw. Sabi ni Clouds TV.
shutting away the world beyond and giving the feel of what it must be like to be wrapped in a maze. He moves down passageways and streets with quick, furtive
Ay, 8 milyones na tayo, guys. 8 milyones na. Lapag-lapag na ng bahay. 8 milyones na po tayo.
drawing close. He is in a village. He has been hiding there for several days, tired and worn and bereft of his magic. He carries his runes.
Sabi ni Prina Sabihon, musta mugaw.
An expenditure of that magic in his past has left him without its use in his present.
7 milyones na po tayo.
A week since the magic was his to command, the longest time he has spent without his protection. He does not know why the magic has failed him so thoroughly.
Clouds TV, dikitan mo na yung may nauna dyan sa taas.
In the world
Dalawa yan sila.
he has failed to prevent
Mga legit yan.
a week without
Pati ikaw, Hastang TV, dikitan mo na yung mas nauna sa inyo.
ahead. He sees
Mga legit yan.
trees
Iwanan nyo lang ng
that
bakas.
never clears. If he can make it to those trees, he may have a chance. Someone in the village has betrayed him, as someone always does. They depend on him, but they do not trust him. The magic
8 milyones na tayo.
but it is frightening as well.
8 milyones. Salamat sa pagbisita.
Is more dangerous than the once and the demons he battles.
Just Judy Vlog.
Out of a misguided belief,
Pa-shout out po, madam.
they can say
Sige, bibigyan kitang jacket. Salamat sa pagpunta.
humankind brought about by the collapse of
Ayan na, maglapag ka na ng inyong bahay.
accepted it as the way of things, but he cannot get used to it. Even as he runs for his life in another time,
Just Judy, mag-ano ka na, maglapag ka na ng iyong bahay.
hard to protect.
Para madikitan mo na sila. Dikit-dikit lang kayo, guys.
He picks up his pace, making for the concealment of the trees. Once
Yan na, may bago tayong kaibigan, si Just Judy. Maglapag ka na ng bahay mo, Just Judy.
his years of survival in the brain
Shout out sa'yo.
avoids his tendency. He is no longer hampered by the limb
Maglapag-lapag na para magdikit-dikit na kayo dyan.
and elsewhere. He knows how to flee and hide as well as how to attack and fight, and he will not be easily found.
Ayan na, sungkitin nyo na yan, si Just Judy.
His old life. He was a knight of the word then too, but in the old world there was still hope. Bitterness colors his thoughts. If he had not failed in his efforts there,
Maglapag ka na, Just Judy.
not be necessary.
Asan ka na ba? Maglapag ka ng bahay mo.
As he gains the tangle of the trees and melts into their darkened mass. They are always with him,
Sana nga, maging totoo.
as they have fed on so many others. Everywhere he goes, they are drawn to him.
Malayo pa sa katotohanan.
He is a magnet for predators of all
Just Judy, maglapag ka na.
pervasive of
Pa-shout out, Madam Just Judy. Oy, maglapag ka na ng iyong tahanan para masungkit ka na nila. 6 na milyones na tayo, guys.
that they sense they have.
Ay, sorry.
He tries to ignore the hunger that reflects in their eyes as they keep pace with him, but he does not completely succeed. Behind him, screams begin to rise from the village,
Just Judy, maglapag ka na.
are reaping their harvest of death, reducing the village to ashes and rubble.
Pakis ko kay Indang Be from Tita.
Men, but
Sabi ni Just Judy, pakis ko ni Indang Be from Tita. Andun sila sa taas.
is the goal to which the servants of the void are pledged.
Judith ba?
Will be attained
Ilapag mo na yung mo, bahay mo, Judith, para
even though
Hastang TV mamaya na kita babalikan.
to prevent it. It will be attained
Sabi ni ni Clouds TV, mamaya ka daw niya balikan Hastang TV kasi ang kanyang sobrang bagal.
lost in time. There are movements on his left and right, and he realizes his hunters have flanked him, moving more quickly than he has expected. He slows and listens.
Hastang TV, maglapag ka daw ng bahay mo at masungkit na nila. Ay, salamat. 8 milyones na tayo, guys. Sabi ni Prina Sabihon, okay ra, Japon, gaw, bahalag, walay sapi. Basta, tagaan lang, tagmaayong gawas clouds. Gaw clouds.
There are so many, the trees are thick with them. Still, he races on, zigzagging down ravines and
Ang sakit na ng ulo ko.
aside the few brave enough to challenge him alone. He tries
Salamat sa pagbisita, guys. 7 milyones tayo.
that it has not forsaken him when he needs it most, but the magic does not respond. They catch him in a clearing where there is
Justy Judy, maglapag ka na ng bahay mo. Nagaantay na sila.
ferociously, bringing to bear all of his considerable fighting skills. But his attackers overwhelm him by sheer
Sabi ni Clouds TV, maulagigaw, maunay,
the stench.
ginaingon nga bahalag walay sapi, ang importante buhi, ha ha ha.
Swarm over him, finding him helpless at last, already beginning
Masarap mo
to
to
touch
sa lamin. Hindi
savor the
kita.
emotions he emits while trapped and helpless. The demon emerges from the crush of bodies.
Salamat guys sa pagbisita ha. Salamat.
No one has ever been able to do this before, but that is because he has always had the magic to prevent it, and now he does not. The demon studies the staff, its twisted face bristling with dark hair and pocked with deep hollows. where
Si
the
ano ba?
skin
Si
collapsed into the bone.
Just Judy. Hindi talaga siya nagbaba ng kanyang tahanan.
Using his inhuman strength, but the staff resists its efforts. Frustrated, the demon throws it down and
Busy siguro ni siya.
the staff will not break. Finally, the demon burns it with magic, scattering the lust men who have gotten too close, leaving the staff charred and smoking within an outline of blackened earth. They bear him from the clearing then, dozens of hands holding him.
Salamat. 6 na milyones.
The demon follows, clutching the remains of the staff. He can hear anew the shrieks and moans of the injured and dying, of the people who first harbored him, and then gave him up, guilty and innocent alike. Many will be dead before the day is done.
Sabi ni April na sabi hon, maujud gaw ang importante mahalaga basta maayo lang lawas atong mga kaparintihan amping mo diha.
Nor is he frightened of the pain. There are rents and tears in his skin, and his blood flows down his arms and legs, but he does not feel it. The pain he feels most lies deep inside his heart. His captors bear him past the village, through a ruined orchard, and up a small rise to a country church. The church is smoldering from a fire that has mostly burned itself out. The roof has collapsed, the walls are scorched, and the windows have been broken out. A clutch of once men had brought a large wooden cross from within and laid it on the open ground. The brackets that secured it to the wall behind the altar are still attached, twisted and scarred.
5 milyones.
With hammers and iron
Salamat sa pagbisita guys.
turning quickly in his approach. Hands lower him roughly to the earth and hold him pinned against the wooden cross, arms outstretched, legs crossed at the ankles. They strip off his boots so that his feet will be unprotected. He does not struggle against them. There is no reason to do so. His time as a knight of the word is ended. He watches almost disinterestedly as the demon casts the ruined staff on the ground at his feet, and the men with the hammers and spikes kneel beside him. They force one hand open and place the tip of a spike against his palm. He remembers the dream he had long
Kamo po
ago
diha gaw sabi ni Clouds TV.
of being in this time and place, of hanging broken from a cross. He remembers and thinks that perhaps the measure of any life is the joining of the past and the future at the moment of death. Then a hammer rises and falls, and the spike is driven through the bones and flesh of his hand. Ross awoke with a gasp, hands clenching the sheets and blankets, body rigid.
5 milyones. 5 milyones tayo guys. Salamat.
For several moments, trying to remember where he was. His dreams were always like this.
Sabi ni Clouds TV.
Feeling adrift and lost. Then he felt Josie Jackson stir next to him, folding her body into his. And he remembered that he was in her house, in her bedroom.
Hindi ganyan. Ay nako. Siguro to si hindi pa tumarunong maglapag ng kanyang bahay. Si Just Judy.
Josie put her arm around his chest, her fingers settling on his shoulder, smooth and warm. Her body heat infused him with reassurance and a sense of place. But any contentment he felt was illusory.
Kasi hindi to maano hindi to maano yung niya Si Just Judy kasi guys, bago pa lang yan. Parang hindi niya siguro alam kung paano maglapag.
Was locking his future in place. He lay there for a long time, thinking through what that meant. A having to live the rest of his
Oh,
life.
hindi nga niya alam.
That even if he
Ano, ganito ha, anuhan kita.
his death was
Punta ka doon sa ano mo, sa mga,
live with that.
di ko gets. Tika, i-ano lang kita, PPM kita.
Change things was now.
Kasi bawal dyan, anuhin eh.
But then he asked himself,
Bawal sabihin.
here. Nest, at least, was with Little John, monitoring his progress and seeking a way to reach him. What was he doing away from both?
Anong lapag?
Fulfilling needs that had nothing to
Kanang,
do with either. The bitter taste in his mouth compressed his lips into a tight line. He was only human. It wasn't fair to expect more. It wasn't possible for him to give it.
ganito na lang, Just Judy, panoorin mo ako, tapos, i-ano ko dito yung,
Conceded in the
ipakita ko sa'yo ha, para alam mo.
it was time to go.
Buksan mo yung ano mo, yung channel mo.
Chose his embrace, climbing from the bed, picking up his clothes, and slipping from the room. He dressed in the hallway and walked downstairs to retrieve his coat and boots. The clock in the kitchen told him it was closing on midnight.
Oh, di ka pwede pa, kasi wala pa ka gikuan eh, kuan eh.
Dark and silent and felt comfortable.
Hindi ka pa pwede kasi tagaan magug ka ni lolo o kuan o pwede na ka, di pa ka pwede.
He was in love with Josie.
Unyarag makagraduate ka.
That was why he was here. That was why.
Kanang kuan, kana na ang singa na na roy. Di ba mo dong ka dito naman to kapipis ato.
Then walked to the bottom of the stairway and looked up into the darkness. He should go to her. He should tell her goodbye.
Just Judy.
Considered it only briefly.
Dong sa imuhang ngani oh, di ba? Ani pakita nimo. Kalang ha.
Nest Freemark froze in the
Kalang
sunlight,
para makakuan ka.
and vaguely uneasy. The lights were all down.
Di ba ingani?
The refrigerator had gone.
Ingani.
They had lost.
Tanawa.
All she could hear was
Madilim
the
kasi.
red
Saglit. Dito ha.
quickly.
Awas ang turu ay.
Children were sitting at the
Turuan ko
table.
muna si ano, si Just Judy.
Ned, Harper whispered.
Ayan oh, pupunta ka doon sa ano mo.
Sweetie,
Tapos i-copy-paste mo.
to the kitchen window to peer outside.
Tapos
Lights blazed up.
balik ka doon,
Hers
balikan mo tong ano, tapos diyan mo ipadala.
around the yard, seeing nothing
Kita mo?
but blowing snow with the shadows of tree limbs
Ay, hindi na makita.
over the drifts. It's okay, she whispered. She wished suddenly that John Ross or even Peg was there to provide
Di nga, ay salamat, pitong ano na tayo,
very
pitong,
alone with the old
sige Just Judy, ako na lang mag-ano sa'yo ha.
to care for,
Ako na lang maglapag sa bahay mo, para,
like the basement door. The basement
kasi, oh, bago kasi yan siya. Teka lang. Ako na lang maglapag sa bahay mo, Just Judy.
someone was climbing them. For an instant, she dismissed the idea as ridiculous, wanting the sound to be her imagination. Then she heard it again. She walked to the kitchen table and bent close to the children. Sit right here for a moment and don't move, she said. She opened the drawer of the broom closet and brought out old Bob's 4-cell flashlight, the big, dependable one he always carried. She gripped it with determination, the weight of it comforting, as she slipped on cat's feet from the kitchen and down the hall to the basement door. She listened a moment, hearing nothing. Then she took a deep breath, yanked open the door, switched on the flashlight.
Ayan na, Just Judy, nilapag ko na yung bahay mo, Just Judy.
She almost missed what was there because it had climbed the wall and was hanging from the ceiling. It was shapeless and black, more shadow than substance. A kind of moving snake caught at the edge of the
Sabi ni, ano, ni
She realized it was there.
Clouds TV,
Light to her
kala ni Just Judy,
arms and
totoong jacket.
eyes
Ayan, pindutin nyo na yan si, ano, si Just Judy, guys. Ako yung naglapag ng bahay niya kasi hindi niya alam kung paano maglapag, guys.
Nest reacted instantly, summoning the magic with which she had been born. The magic that had been the legacy of the Freemark women.
Just Judy, nakita mo, nilapag ko na yung bahay mo.
Eyes with the dark horror scrabbling up the stairs. She sent the magic spinning into it. It was like burrowing into primal ooze, as if the creature had no bones and there was nothing about it that was solid. But it stumbled and lost its grip anyway, the magic stealing its momentum and twisting its reactions, and it tumbled away into the dark. Nest slammed the door, punched the button lock, and rushed back into the kitchen.
Si Just Judy kasi guys,
Chairs away from the table,
ano yan, hindi pa siya talaga marunong.
tilted it so that its back was under the
Kasi bago lang siya.
Her breath came in quick gasps. She had to get the children out of there. She hurried back to the kitchen, snatched up Harper, and grabbed Little John by the arm. Come with me, she urged as calmly as she could manage. Quick now. She got them to the front door and began shoveling them into their coats. Harper was protesting, and Little John was just standing there looking at her. She fought to keep her composure, listening for the sound of the thing in the basement, thinking, no lights, no phone, no transportation. Trapped. The basement door flew open with a crash, the lock giving way, the chair splintering apart. Keeping the children behind her, she stepped into the hall to face her attacker. Only it wasn't there. She speared the darkness with the flashlight, searching for it. She tried the ceiling first, then the walls. Nothing. She backed toward the children, eyes flitting left and right.
Ayun na, 4 na milyones.
They must have ducked through one doorway or the other. She felt her insides churning.
Ayan na, sungkitin nyo na yan si Just Judy. Nilapag ko na yung kanyang bahay kasi hindi siya marunong maglapag.
In seconds, he would begin to break free. She could not afford to let that happen, not in front of the children. Hawkeye shot out from under the Christmas tree, a blur of orange fur as he disappeared down the hall. She swung the beam of the flashlight back toward the kitchen, frantically searching. Where is it? It came from behind her, out of the darkness at the hallway's other end, from the direction of the
Ayan na guys, magsungkitan na kayo dyan.
and swung about to block its attack just before it launched itself through the beam of her light. It came at her in a rush, a black and formless mass. Unexpected,
Natatawa ako dito kay Just Judy. Sabi niya pala, yung jacket ko, bigay mo kay Manang, hahaha, kunin ko pag uwi ko. Ang sagot naman ni Clouds TV, kala ni Just Judy, totoong jacket. Ganyan din ako nung una, nung di pa ko kamao. Sus, Ginoo ko kay kuan man ka na ng palamuot lagi ning wapat di ta sus labi na itong unang-una pa. Sige silag ingon ako nga lapag-lapag. Sao man ni paglapag ani di mo ko kamao. Awa jud ko mauwaw sa host nangutana jud ko. Sao man ang paglapag host ingon man si host nga aho asa lamang kang ako sa lamay mulapag sa imong bay para na unya tuluan ta ka og kanang wa na daghang kuan sino aron. Mao to nga kuan. Kuan po to siya taga Bohol.
Her own magic was woefully inadequate. It provided a holding action at best. Harper was sobbing, crying out for her mother, but there was no time to comfort her. She hurried the children to the closet on the far side of the room, pushed them inside, and told them
5 milyones tayo guys. Tika lang ha, bigyan ko muna ng
she had barely closed
ano,
the closet door when she heard noises
ng
outside.
tubig yung aking darling, baka nauhaw na. Ay, sabi ni Hastang TV,
Backward, unable to hold his ground, Wraith went down in the tangle of legs and bristling hair.
ano yun? One na po ako kay Just Judy.
Almost immediately,
Dan na po ako kay Just Judy. Just Judy, Dan na daw po si Hastang TV.
it took Nest a moment to realize what had happened.
Ikaw na lang bahala magsukli sa kanya.
The open doorway, gimlet eyes searching the darkness.
Shout out kay Just Judy. Ikaw na daw bahala sukli. Oh, Bisaya di ay kahos, parehas di ay ta. Oh, Bisaya kayo. Alegria.
Unexpectedly,
Hastang Alegria.
then the closet door cracked softly behind her, and Little John slipped into view.
Alegria.
Frozen in place for a moment, as if mesmerized by the tableau before him. His eyes shifted from Nest to Wraith and back again. Terror and despair were mirrored there,
Ayan na, inano ko na yung mo.
but there was a dark and haunting
Asa dapit
as well.
Alegria mo sa sa katigbian?
Plea for contact.
Sa Bohol ba mo? Alegria.
The gypsy morph was
Alegria.
reaching out to her at last, groping and
Sabi ni Just Judy, ha, okra oy, no need na lin oy. Ako nang gikuan, ako nang gilapag imuhang kuan.
They raced to her with a thought, drawing him back inside, trying to shield his presence from the
Ako nang gilapag imuhang bahay.
swiftly obedient,
Kaya ikaw na bahala magsukli nila.
but exuding a sense of
Kay
reluctance.
tapos na daw si
She did not even think
si Hastang TV.
But Little John turned frantic. He came at her in a rush, crossing the room in a churning of arms and legs, reaching her just moments after Wraith had disappeared inside. He threw himself at her, this strange, enigmatic boy who would not be understood or revealed, and wrapped his arms around her as if she had become the most precious thing alive. In the silence that followed,
Kasadya.
in the center of her bedroom, her arms holding Little John
Oh,
close against her breast as she tried to reassure him
Hastang sadya.
for whatever needs he had, and would give
Ah,
to him whatever he
tag-
required. She heard him cry
Hatang
softly,
sadya.
"Mama,"
Saan kayo sa
said in his
kanang
child's
buhok
voice.
pareha dita ini? Ano sa ganito siya ingon niya?
Wednesday,
Bisaya
December
de kahos parehas di eta hastang alegriha di ay hastang alegriha. Kaignan po ko og alegria. Hastang sadya.
awake by 6
Du
o'clock the next
kuan naman untay mata.
dressed and ready.
Upat naman untay mata di pa jud gihapon makitaan. Asa mo dapit sa kuan? Hastang TV. Sa Bisaya. Salamat sa pagbisita ninyo ha, guys. Apat na milyones. Siguro siguro yung iba kanina. Namingwit pa. Kaya umalis, namingwit siguro. Taga Cotabato Kuhos, Bisayang dako. Parihar man deta di ay mga lunlong mga Bisaya. Oh, oy. Mindanao na Bisaya. Kami Bisdak. Buholano. Ay, sorry. $4 milyones tayo, guys. Nagsialisa na yung iba, nangisda na siguro. Adtong last year, hinguli kog buhol, tong last year. Oh, daghang kayong mga kuan dito, ug adto juga magsuroy buhol, lami dito suroyan. Adto laging pag-uli na ho, nangaligo man dito sa kuan. Sus, kabarato ra jud og entrance. Sa ano ba yun? Dumaluan Beach ba yung pangalan nun? Lami kayo. Kina tinawan nagbulo-bulo tong tubig. Nya kinabaratuhan og entrance. Naglit lang kay mo doon sa kog CR. Oo. Tubig ka? Dali mo ko doon taas. Lagi daw kam sambros na ako amigo nag-invite sa ako maglakaw dami dito. Oo, lami jud dito sa Ruyan. Lami jud og manong mo dito lami suruyan kay daghan magkasuruyan. Nya barato pa pod. Barato ra. Dong pud mo og kuan, Chocolate Hill, Sagbayan Peak, doon ra na sa mo Kanang Sagbayan Peak doon ra kaayo. Malabyan ninyo ng katigbian, kanang katigbian. Kuan kana nang naapo na yung mga daghang suruyanan diha. Lami jud mo daghan jud mong mga kuan didto. Ma-view. Apat na milyones po tayo guys. Nagsialisa na ang mga iba. Na. Ay, 4 na milyones tayo guys. Salamat sa pagbisita. Salamat sa iyo, Hastang TV. Sa pagbisita mo. At saka ikaw, Just Judy. Just Judy. Ano pa ba? Si Clouds TV. Si Iprena Sabihon. Sino pa ba ito isa? Si Almaong. Angeline Hanuhan. Angeline Hanuhan, salamat. Pati sa'yo, like swerte. Annalisa, tapos si Lily's Happiness, salamat din. Tsaka si Baby Nona, salamat sa inyo lahat sa pagbisita sa aking tahanan.
To go. She walked up the road in the still, cold darkness to the payphone at the all-night gas station on Lincoln Way. and spent 20 minutes arranging for repairmen from the electrical and phone companies to make unscheduled early morning stops at her home. Who to call to make this happen. Not that it was all that easy to persuade the people she knew to change things around on the day before Christmas, but in the end, she got the job done. She had taken the time to determine the extent of the damage last night before finally going off to sleep. The phone line was cut where it came into the house, so that wasn't a big deal. But the entire circuit breaker box had been ripped out of the wall, and she had no idea how difficult it would be to fix that. She carried back a box of donuts and styrofoam cups of hot chocolate and coffee, thinking that they would at least have that for sustenance. The snow had stopped, and the wind had died, so the world around her was still and calm. The children were sleeping, exhausted physically and emotionally from last night's events. It had taken her a long time to get them to sleep, especially little John, who had done a complete 180-degree turn toward her. Instead of distancing himself as he had before, going off to a private world to contemplate things hidden from her, he had attached himself so completely that it seemed any sort of separation would break his heart. She could barely get him to release her long enough to greet John Ross, who came through the door less than half an hour after her battle with the thing in the basement, and found the gypsy morph clinging to her like a second skin. She was pleased by Little John's change, but puzzled as well.
Salamat sa inyo. May 3 milyones pa tayo.
Said nothing more since. He seemed devastated by her failure to understand what he
Nangisda ang iba.
wanted. She held him and cooed to him and told him it was all
Ay.
right, that she was there and she loved him.
Oh.
But nothing seemed to help. He was disconsolate and bereft in a way she could not understand. It has something to do with Wraith, she had told John Ross.
Salamat sa pagtamsak. Salamat.
In the aftermath of the night's events, the children asleep at last, and the house secured as best it could be. It was cold in the house and growing colder without any heat, and she had tucked the children into sleeping bags in front of the fireplace and built a fire to keep them warm. She whispered so as not to wake them. When he saw me standing there, while Wraith was still across the room, he had such excitement and hope in his eyes, John. But when Wraith came back to me, he was devastated. Maybe he was frightened by what he saw. Ross was looking at the sleeping boy, brow furrowed. Maybe he didn't understand. Nest shook her head. He's a creature of magic. He understood what was happening. No, it was something else. It was Wraith that bothered him so. Why would that be? Wraith has been there all along. And the gypsy morph hasn't wanted anything to do with you the entire time. Ross looked at her meaningfully. No, she agreed. Maybe you are being asked to make a choice between magics or between lives. What sort of choice? I don't know. Just give up one magic for another, perhaps? Ross shook his head. She thought about it again, walking home from the gas station. Apparently the gypsy morph couldn't find a way to tell her what it wanted. Little John was a boy, but he wasn't altogether a real boy. Rather something like Pinocchio, wooden and jointed and made out of fairy dust. Perhaps he did want her to choose him over Wraith. But how was she supposed to do that? It wasn't as if she hadn't thought of ridding herself of the ghost wolf of her father's demon magic time and again. She didn't want that magic inside her. She was constantly battling to keep it under control. Last night she had failed, forced to release it because of a demonic presence. She knew she would never be at peace as long as Wraith stayed locked away inside her. But it wasn't as if the choice was hers. Snowplows rumbled past her, clearing wood lawn and the surrounding side streets, metal blades scraping the blacktop in a series of long, rasping whines. Lights glimmered from street lamps and porches. From from solitary windows and passing headlights. But the darkness was still thick and unbroken this Christmas Eve day. The solstice was only just past, and the short days would continue well into January. It would not be light until after 8 o'clock, and it would be dark again by 4. If the sun appeared at all, they would be lucky. Not much comfort there, if she hoped to find any. Head lowered in thought, she walked on. Ross was awake and waiting on her return, standing in the kitchen, staring out the window. The children were still asleep. She gave him coffee and a donut, took the same for herself, and they sat at the kitchen table. I've been awake almost all night, he told her, his gaze steady and alert nevertheless. I couldn't sleep.
3 milyones po tayo, guys.
Me either. Never have gone to Josie's. I should have stayed with you and Little John.
This ends side 1 of cassette 7. Please turn the cassette over.
She leaned forward. It wouldn't have changed anything. You know that. We would have lost Bennett anyway. And if you had been here to protect us from that thing in the basement, Wraith might not have come out. And Little John might not have responded to me in the way he did. John, that was the first time he's given me a second look. That was the first positive reaction I've gotten out of him. I'm this close to breaking through. I can feel it. If there's time enough left. He shook his head. I don't know, Nest. This has gotten entirely out of hand. Findo Gask is all over the place, just waiting for a chance to attack us in some new way. I'm sure he was responsible for that thing in the basement. He's probably responsible for Bennett's disappearance as well. Nest was silent a moment.
3 milyones po tayo, guys.
She admitted. Did you call the police to report her missing? She shook her head. Not yet. She was gone the night before last, too, and came home on her own. I keep hoping she'll do so now. She exhaled warily. But if she isn't back by the time the phone is fixed, I'll make the call. Ross brought the black staff around in front of him and tightened his grip on it. It's too dangerous for me to be here any longer, he said softly. I shouldn't have come in the first place. I have to take Little John and get out of here before anything else happens, before some other horror shows up in your basement or your bedroom closet or wherever. And this time you aren't quick enough to save yourself. Nest sipped at her coffee, thinking the matter through. Outside, the darkness was beginning to lighten. The world glimmered crystalline and white in a faint wash of gray. She replayed last night's battle with the black thing, experiencing again the
Ayan,
terror and
ano?
rage that
Eliza
overcome,
Reed.
remembering how it had felt
Paano ba yung
great
pag-pronounce
to
yan?
come out
Goresa.
once again
Hi, Madam Sayon.
after she had worked
Na-
so hard to keep it from happening.
Nakita ko na po.
She felt Little John's angry
Nakapasok ka na.
betrayal.
Hi sa'yo.
She couldn't stop thinking
Emily.
about it. I have an idea, John, she said.
Kumusta kayo dyan?
I'll have to talk to Pig about it, but it might give us some breathing space. Ross,
Salamat at pagpasok mo sa aking tahanan.
Little John and go, it will give you more breathing space. If you take Little John and go, we will have given up, not to mention what effect it would have on it. She held his gaze firmly with her own. Just let me talk to Pick, then we'll see, okay? He nodded wordlessly, but didn't look happy. She got up to check on the children before he could say anything else. The electrician arrived shortly afterward, a big burly fellow named Mike, who looked at the ruined breaker box, shook his head, and wanted to know how in the hell something like that could have happened. His words. Nest told him the house had been broken into, and all sorts of damage had been done that didn't seem to have any purpose. Mike shrugged and went to work. accepted.
Hi sa'yo, ano yan? Minglong.
She was feeding the rest of the donuts
Good
and
evening.
chocolate and some apple juice to Harper and Little John, and fixed
I
the
give you
line in
jacket
about 2
now.
minutes. The phone guy, unlike Mike, didn't seem all that concerned with being given an explanation. He simply repaired the damage and
It's
left.
time for fishing time.
Ness called the police then to report Bennett missing.
I'm good.
All out of the children's hearing. This was easier than she had anticipated because Little John had gone back to ignoring her. She had hugged him on waking, and he had barely responded, eyes distant once more. That 1,000-yard stare back in place. He sat on the sofa and looked into the park until
Guys, ilapag nyo na yung mga bahay nyo kasi nandito si Lok Minglong
private world.
para magdikit-dikitan na kayo dyan, magtamsak-tamsakan na kayo.
He didn't come back to her from wherever he had gone. The police took down her report and said they would stay in touch. They didn't have any news at their end, which was probably all to the good. Nest
5 milyones po tayo, guys.
the door on her own.
May bago tayong kapatid, si
She still believed
Minglong.
without involving the police.
Lok
Hanging
Minglong.
up her coat, which she had tossed
Ayan na,
aside,
naglapag na siya ng kanyang bahay, guys.
Bennett's note in the pocket. Dear Nest, I am sorry to run off like this, leaving Harper.
Dikitan nyo na po siya.
I have to get away. I used last night, and I know I will use again in a little while. I don't want to, but I can't help myself. I guess I am hopeless. I don't like Harper to be around me when I'm using.
Magdikit-dikitan na kayo dyan, guys.
I guess maybe I planned to leave her with you all along. I can't take care
Legit
of her.
yan si legit yan si
Guess that
Minglong.
Please take care of her patients. I trust you. Harper is all I have, and I want to keep her safe and not have her grow up like me. When I am better, I will come back for her. Tell her I love her, and will think of her every day. I'm sorry for causing so much trouble. I love you. Bennett.
Ayan na po, magdikit-dikit na po kayo dyan.
Several times trying to think what to do, but there was really nothing she could do.
Okay, thank you sa'yo. Thank you, Minglong.
Possibilities. She did not have any difficulty with the idea of looking after Harper, although she had no way of knowing
Thank you very much to visit to my house.
her mother had left her. It had happened before, but that didn't mean it would make things any easier this time. Mike, the electrician, wandered out from the basement long enough.
Sabi ni Minglong, everyone can look at my house. I'll check you back.
Put on her parka and went out into the park.
Dikitan nyo na si Minglong, guys. Very very legit.
Across her backyard and into the snowy expanse of the ballpark flats. He soared out of the deep
Sabi ni
woods
Minglong,
east
that's
of
all. It's my pleasure.
The sky
Salamat
clear,
din sa,
bright,
thank you very
hard
much
as
to
day.
you.
The clouds
Minglong.
low and threatening above the earth, as if snow might reappear at any moment. Mist filtered through the woods from off the frozen river. Long tendrils snaking about the trunks and branches and wandering off into the bordering subdivisions and roadways. The park was empty this day, leaving Nest a solitary watcher as the dark specks that were Pig and Jonathan slowly took on definition with their approach. The owl swung wide of Nest, then settled in an oak bordering the roadway. Pig climbed off and began to make his way down the trunk. He moved with quick, jerky motions like a foraging squirrel, dropping from branch to branch, circling the trunk when a better path was needed, stopping every so often to look around. Jonathan folded his broad wings into his body, tucked his head into his shoulders, and became a part of it.
I don't know, maybe it's going fishing some of the people.
Branches under her shoulder, where he sat, puffing from the effort.
But all of her is legit also.
Owl anyway, he complained. You'd think you'd be willing to land on a lower branch, wouldn't you? For now, he's a bit on the slow side. She turned around and sat down in the snow with her back against the tree. I need your help. So what to do? The Sylvan chuckled, pleased with his attempt at humor. Can you think of a time when you didn't need my help? the more. It was a rather
Maybe they
frightening
going for
sound,
fishing.
given that it emanated from a stick figure only 6 inches high. Nest sighed, determined not to be baited into an argument. I need you to concoct some anti-demon magic. Something on the order of what you use to protect the trees in the park when there's something attacking them. Whoa, wait a minute. Pig straightened abruptly, suddenly all business. His twiggy finger stabbed the air in her direction. Are we talking about Fendo gas? We are. Well, you can stop right there. Pig threw up his hands. Well, I
Bro
look like anyone
Bandit.
just
Hi sa'yo, Bro Bandit.
that kind of magic. It
Hi,
gotta
hi,
be a
hi.
light of the word living under your roof. Use him. He's got the kind of
Lapag ka na ng bahay mo at matamsakan ka na nila.
What do you need with me when you got him? Will you calm down and listen to me for a minute?
Ay. Sabi ni ano pala ni Bro Bandit, I don't have video yet.
Arms windmilling. I'm a Sylvan, he repeated. I don't fight demons. I don't charge off into battle with things that ain't for lunch.
Minglong, Bro Bandit said,
And believe
I joined by Lok Minglong.
it's all of my energy and magic to handle that little chore nest, Mark. And I don't need you coming around and asking me to conjure up some sort of thing. Please. Half-baked magic
Ah,
that will work on the best day of my life against
Sabi ni ano, Lok Minglong, yes. And then I see him,
He went
okay.
silent then, breathing hard from his tirade, glaring at her
Ah,
with glossy brows.
sabi ni ano, ni Minglong,
More about the subject of
he is honesty as well.
Let me
He's
start
your
over,
friend.
she
Okay,
said quietly.
friend.
I don't really expect
Ah.
you to conjure up anti-demon magic. That was a poor choice of words. He grunted. Nor do I expect you to sacrifice your time and energy
Good to
in a
hear
cause
that.
where you can make no difference. I know how hard you work to
Ay,
protect the park, and I wouldn't ask
ito
you
lang.
to do something that would jeopardize that effort. Her attempt at calming him seemed to be working, she saw. At least he was listening again. She gave him her best serious business look.
Ay, thank you very much guys ha sa patamsak sa akin.
She told him about what had happened during the snowstorm with the disappearance of Bennett's gun and the attack by the black thing hiding in her basement. She told him about Wraith coming out to defend them and of his struggle with their attacker. Fendo gas for sure, Pig snapped. You can't mistake demon mischief for anything but what it is. Well, you
Huh?
understand then when I tell you I am more than a little on edge about all this.
Bigyan mo si
She
Papa ng
relaxed
chocolate.
a hair but kept her eye on him, waiting for his
Ano ba to,
mercurial
guys?
personality to undergo another shift. I can't have this sort of thing hanging over my head every time I walk through the door. I
Okay.
have to find a way to prevent it from happening again. John
Doon sa
Ross
ano?
says
Ay.
he should take the gypsy morph and leave. But if he does that, we lose all
Bigyan mo ng
chance of
dalawa.
finding a way to solve its riddle. It will last a few more days, then break apart and be gone. The magic will be lost forever. Pig shrugged.
I-close mo na yung ref.
Magic might be lost anyway, given the fact that no one knows what it is or how to use it. Maybe Ross is right. Now it was Ness's turn to glare. So you think I should just give up? I didn't say that. All I should worry about is helping you in the park. The rest of the world can just be damned. He grimaced. Don't swear, I don't like it. Well, I don't like the idea of you giving up, or telling me to give up either. Will you calm down? Not if you're telling me you won't even try to help. Criminy! Pig was back on his feet, shuffling this way and that on the narrow ledge of her shoulder. All right. What is it you want me to do? He wheeled on her. What, that is, that doesn't involve anti-demon magic. She lifted her hands placatingly. I'm not going to ask you to do anything I know you can't. She paused. What I want you to create is a kind of early warning system. I want you to spin out a net of magic and throw it over my house so the demons can't come in again without my knowing it. He studied her doubtfully. You're not asking me to use magic to keep them out? No, I'm asking you to use magic to let me know if they try to get in. I'm asking you to create a warning system. Well, he huffed. Well, he threw up his hands again. Why didn't you say so before? I can do that. Of course I can. He glanced at the sky. Look at the time we wasted talking about it when we could have been putting it in place. Criminy, Ness. You should have gotten to the point more quickly. Well, come on, he interrupted, jumping from her shoulder and scrambling back up the tree trunk toward Jonathan. He flew the owl back across the park to her house while she followed on foot. Midday was approaching, but it was still misty and gray, the clouds low and threatening, and the air sharp with cold. The wind did not return, and no new snow had begun to fall, but the return of both seemed altogether likely. Ness stared at the houses bordering the park, indistinct and closed away. Their roofs
I'm not too
snow-capped,
sure. I
their
think
walls drifted, their eaves iced. There were
25
cars on the
only.
roads, but not many, and they moved with caution on the slick surface. It was Christmas Eve day, but she thought people
I'm not too
would try to
sure.
confine their celebrations to
But
their
this is
homes this
monthly.
year. When she reached the house, it was
But
already at dark.
if I remember, that is
Before
25.
in the park, when boarding a tree, the process he used was the same in each case. Here he flew Jonathan from tree to house, to tree, back to house, and so on, forming a crisscross pattern that draped
What are you gonna use? Computer or cell phone?
At each tree he stopped long enough to conjure up a sort of locking device and receptor, invisible to the eye, but there to serve a dual purpose: to anchor the magic in that particular place, and to feed its lines of power.
Laptop.
No materials were used, and
That's good enough. Even some of the
but the result was to render
some
the
of
house
people use only cell
as if a
phone.
fine steel mesh had been thrown over it. All passageways in or out were covered. All entrances
How
were
about the
alarmed.
laptop that is load also or not load?
Whatever form they took would be detected instantly. It took him almost an hour to complete the task, working his way slowly and carefully from point to point all around the house.
Because my internet is
Making certain that nothing
monthly.
was missed. She stayed out of his way
Monthly
as he
bill,
worked,
not
watching
load.
in silence. There would be no more surprises like last night's. If the demons tried to come back again, she would know. Now,
Yes,
here's
but
the
I mean
thing to
internet
remember.
speed which can go
Nick
live.
advised when he was done. He sat on her
But my
shoulder
internet
once more,
is only
Jonathan perched in
25.
a sycamore some distance off,
But
awaiting
it's
his
okay.
summons.
No problem.
Any attempt by a demon to get past the net and into your house
Yeah,
will
25
trip your alarm.
kph the internet, but the monthly of mine is 1,500 because I go to the high speed of the internet. That was the high here, 25. That is my monthly. 1,500 peso and then 25 speed.
So close everything up and keep it closed. She frowned. I didn't know that part. Well, it hardly has any bearing in the park when we're boarding the trees because there isn't anything living inside the net that would open it up in any case. It's different here. Keep everything shut tight. If you do that, the demons can't get past the system without you knowing.
Yeah.
Think you can remember that? I can remember. She gave him a smile. Thanks, Pig. Just remember what I told you. That'll be
But
better.
my speed of internet
He looked
is alright.
exceedingly proud of
Yeah.
himself as he jumped from her shoulder and scurried
2
across the
MB
yard
is
to climb back aboard Jonathan.
cost
Together they flew
2
off into
MB
the
is
days.
oh
She watched them go,
25
thinking
MB is
that
mine.
of all her friends over all the years
20
was still
20
most
per
reliable.
month. $20.
She went to the house. There was nothing different about it.
$20.
She felt nothing different inside. She She was taking this entire warning
Mine is
system business
25
on faith,
MBs.
but where Pick was concerned, faith was enough. Certainly the demons would detect the system's presence.
Because my
That
husband
would be enough to keep them
is
at bay
a
for a year.
foreigner.
Maybe that would
He
be
don't
enough
want
time
to
for
be,
her to find out
yeah,
what it was that would
25
unlock the job
megabytes.
secret.
He
She
always
found herself
watching on
wondering
her
suddenly how she had ever gotten
videos.
to this point in her
That's
life.
why he don't want
She was trapped in her
the low
home
internet.
with a creature she did not understand and under attack from demons.
Sometimes he
She was
always
struggling with her own magic and
heard
with the
her
magics of
books
other
on
beings,
the
the combination of which threatened to
on the
overwhelm her at any
videos.
moment.
That's why he
She
don't
was
want to
hiding
be
the secrets that
slow
would
internet.
destroy
That's
her.
why mine is
She was
25.
29 years
But
old, adrift in both the purpose and direction of
Huh?
her life, her future uncertain.
yan dyan oh.
What was her reason for being? Her gift of magic
25.
pointless. Her life appeared to have led nowhere. She had been special since birth, but nothing of who she had been gave her insight into who she was meant to be. She was at an impasse.
Oo,
The events of
25
these past few
MBs.
days only pointed out how thoroughly lost she was. If Gran were still here, would she be able to tell me what I ought to do? Would she understand the reason for all that has happened in my life? Or would she be as lost as I am? Likely, she would just tell me to get on with it. There was no steadying influence in her life. No parents, grandparents, husband, or children. No family. There were friends.
Because here in the house, a lot of people using
She felt the lack of an anchor,
my
a
kids,
touchstone that would give her
my
a sense of
cousin, my
belonging.
nephew, then my husband almost 24 hours in the computer.
All the places she had grown up in, the tapestry of her journey out of childhood. But somehow they weren't enough anymore. They served only to trigger memories that locked her in the past. She stood thinking on the matter for a long time, staring off into space, traveling distances too far to be seen clearly. Then the door opened, and John Ross stepped out onto the back steps. "Better come inside, Nest," he said quietly. "The sheriff's office is on the phone. They found Bennett Scott." Chapter 22. As she drove to Community General Hospital, nosing the Taurus between the dirt and cinder-encrusted snowbanks plowed up from the streets, Nest found herself reflecting on the cyclical nature of
4 na
life.
milyones po tayo guys. Salamat sa pagtamhak sa kay host.
Mundane and obvious, but about the ways in which it happened. Sometimes in the course of living, you couldn't
Yeah,
avoid
that's what he
ending
said.
up where you began. You might travel far distances
But I'm not too
and
sure.
experience strange events. But when all was said and done, your journey brought
I
you
heard
right
on
back
that on
around
news,
to
but
where
I don't
everything
know.
started. It was so
It's
in
true.
an unexpected way for Bennett Scott. She had almost died on the cliffs at Sinisippi Park 15 years ago, when she was only 5. Nest had been there to save her then,
Yeah.
but not this time. It
How
made
all
Nest
my kids
wonder
they
if the
they
matter
play
of
on that.
Bennett's death was in some way
Sometimes
predetermined.
midnight go
Saving her from
they
the
sleep in
first
midnight
time,
because
and only forestalled
always
the
play on the
It was strange
Mobile
and
Legend.
troubling that Bennett should die this way, after escaping once, after it seemed that whatever else might threaten, at least she was safe from this. Thinking on the cyclical nature of Bennett Scott's life and death reminded Nest of her mother. Caitlin Ann Fremont had also died at the bottom of the cliffs in Sinisippi Park shortly after Nest was born. For years, there had been questions about how she had died, whether she had slipped and fallen,
all
wandered
my
off by
kids was
mistake,
very
or
addicted.
committed
Sometimes
suicide. It wasn't until Nest had confronted her demon father that she had discovered the truth.
because sometimes
He
he
had
sleep
instigated the
late.
events and emotional trauma that had led to her mother's death. Call it suicide or call it a calculated orchestration. The cause and effect are the same. Now, she wondered if demons were responsible for Bennett's death as well. Had Vindo Gask and that girl Penny and whoever else might be Ian's death? Nest could not mother, as with the children of
Yeah,
the park
always.
she and Pick had saved so often in that summer 15 years ago. Bennett Scott had been prey to demon wiles. She could still see Bennett as a 5-year-old, standing at the edge of the cliffs atop
Sometimes
the
the
bluff at the
laptop is not
campground. Feeders
off
gathered all
because
around
they
her,
already sleep.
cajoling her,
Ay,
urging
Diyos
her
ko.
on, taking advantage of the fear, doubt, and sadness that suffused her life. It wouldn't have been all that different this time. Bennett Scott's life hadn't changed all that much. It was Larry Spence who called with the news. A young woman had been found at the bottom of the cliffs below the
Yeah,
campground
sometimes
at
I hear
Mississippi
that.
Park, he advised. She fit the description of Bennett Scott, reported missing earlier this
That's
morning.
why sometimes
Could
I ask
Nest
to my
please
kids,
come
what happened
down
to you?
and identify the
Who
body?
was talking to you?
Nest found
She said,
herself
Mama, I was
wondering
talking to my
irrationally
playmates.
if anyone else worked at the
Ah,
sheriff's office besides Larry Spence. She parked a car in the visitor zone of the hospital, went into the lobby, crossed to the elevators, and following the signs, descended to the morgue. Larry Spence was waiting when the elevator doors opened and she stepped out. Sorry about this, girl. She wasn't sure exactly
wait
what
a
was
minute, I need
sorry about,
water.
but she nodded anyway. Let me see her. Spence walked her through a pair of heavy doors and down a short corridor with more doors on either side. They turned into the second one on the left. Bright light flooded a small chamber with a surgical table supporting a body draped with a sheet. Jack Armbruster, the coroner, stood sipping coffee and watching television. He turned at their entry and greeted Nest with a nod and a hello. She walked to the table and stood quietly while he lifted the sheet from Bennett Scott's face. She looked almost childlike. Her features were bruised and scraped, and her skin was very white. The metal rings and studs from her various piercings gave her the appearance of being cobbled together in some fashion. Her eyes were closed. She might have been sleeping. Nest stared at her silently for a long time, then nodded. Armbruster lowered the sheet again, and Bennett was gone. I want her taken over to Showalter's, Nest announced quickly, tears springing to her eyes in spite of her resolve. I'll call Marty. I want him to handle the burial. I'll pay for everything. She could barely see. The tears were clouding her vision, giving her the sense that everything around her was floating away. There was an uncomfortable silence when she finished, and she wiped angrily at her eyes. You'll have to wait until Jack completes his work here, Ness.
In Cambodia, they played and insulted each other as well. Oh my God.
She glared at me.
That's why I'm always
There
tell to my
are
kids,
unexplained
you know,
circumstances surrounding her death. There has
why
to
are
be an
you talking like
autopsy
that?
performed.
I'm not talking to you, Mama. I'm talking to my games here because
Find out
somebody
how she died.
talking to me.
The
Oh,
coroner shook his head.
really?
I know how she died. Prolonged exposure. But there's other concerns. What he means is that preliminary blood samples revealed the presence of narcotics in her system. Spence interjected quickly. A lot of narcotics. In addition, she has needle marks all up and down her arms and legs. You know what that means? She was an addict. Nest agreed, casting a withering look in his general direction without making eye contact. I knew that when she
You're
came to
from
see me.
Cambodia?
She told me she was an addict then. She came back to Hopewell with her daughter to get help. That may be so.
Did you already get all the...
Shifting his weight, hands deep
Yeah,
in the pockets of
it's
his
4
deputy sheriff's coat.
million.
The fact remains, she died under
Scroll,
suspicious
scroll.
circumstances, and we need to learn as much about her condition
And then they
at
go
the
back
time
to
of
you.
death as possible. You see that, don't you? She did, of course. Rumors of drug sales in the park, an addict living in her house, and mysterious strangers visiting. Larry Spence had already formed his opinion about what had happened, and now he was looking for proof. It was ridiculous, but there wasn't any help for it. He would act on this as he chose, and anything she might say would do nothing to change things. Who found her? She asked suddenly. Larry Spence shook his head. Anonymous phone call. Oh, right, Ness thought. There's some damage to her body, but nothing that is
Scroll it.
consistent with her fall. On Brewster observed, already beginning preparations for
Only
his
one
work,
house above.
laying
No,
out steel instruments
they have.
and pans, spreading the
Scroll it
cloths.
and then they go back to you.
But I don't think that's what killed her. I think it was the cold. Of course,
Because they said to me
I might buy
to
the drugs
they go
affecting her
back
heart,
later
too. I can't tell
because
until I
they
open her up.
pising.
Ness
That's
started
why.
to the doors. Just to see that she goes over to Showalter's when you're done poking around, okay? She was out the door and down the hall in a rush, so angry she could barely manage to keep from breaking
They
down.
have here
She was aware of Larry's fence following, hurrying to catch up.
Baby
There's a
Nona.
possibility,
Her house
called
was
after
there.
her, that the
Lily's
young lady didn't fall over the
happiness.
cliffs by accident. In cases like
Lily's
this, we
happiness.
can't ignore the obvious. Don't get too close to me, Larry, she was thinking. Don't even think of trying to touch me. He walked back through the heavy doors into the little waiting area and punched the
Clouds
elevator button.
TV.
The doors opened and they stepped inside.
Clouds
It was
TV is
uncomfortably
there.
close.
Oh, Clouds
I
Hunter
told you about the
TV.
rumors. He
And
persisted.
then
His
the
big
other
hands
one.
nodded. Maybe they weren't just rumors. Maybe they were fact. It's possible that this young lady was mixed
Hastang
up in
TV.
whatever was going on.
They said to me
Of course, don't, Larry. She wanted
to
to
back
say,
if they,
but kept it to herself.
you know what I
He
mean.
had no idea what was
And
going on.
then
He couldn't begin to understand what was involved. He had no clue he was being used. He saw things in ordinary terms and familiar ways,
just
and that sort of
just
thinking
Judy
was applied
TV,
here.
just
His
Judy
reality
Vlog.
and hers were entirely different. She might try to educate him, but she didn't think he would listen to her. Not about demons and feeders, not about magic, not about the war.
Because
between the
maybe
word
they
and the
going
void,
to
and
other
the way that war used up people's
other house,
lives.
the pissing time.
I'll have to come out
But
and
all of
take
that
a
is
statement,
legit,
he continued.
very legit.
And for Mr. Ross, her anger dissipated, replaced by a cool, damp sadness that filled her with pain and loss. She looked at him dully as they stepped off the elevator and into the hospital lobby.
Oh, 5 milyones na tayo, guys.
Larry, everything I know
Magbaba
is
na kayo,
fascinating.
guys, kasi nandyan si Ninglong, nag-aantay sa inyo.
John will give you a statement too. You come by the house if that's what you need.
Magbaba kayo ng bahay nyo uli, guys.
Now this isn't about drugs. You can take that for what it's worth. He stared at her. What's it about then?
Magbaba.
It's about children, Larry. It's about keeping them safe from things that want to destroy them. She sipped on her parka.
Maglapag kayo ng iyong mga bahay, guys.
Had to tell a little girl she's going to see her mother again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Climbed in her car and drove home through the snowy streets of the iron gray day.
It's not
There's
3.
been no gas would kill Bennett Scott.
I know it's 4 or 5. Wait a minute.
Nothing demons did surprised her anymore. But what purpose did this particular killing serve? Why did they
1,
bother with Bennett?
2.
She wasn't involved in Gas's effort to recover the gypsy morph. She didn't even know what a morph was, or what a demon was, or that
3,
anything of
4.
that world existed. Her mood darkened the more she thought about it. This whole business smacked of spitefulness and revenge.
5.
It smelled of demon rage. Gas
Clouds
was
Hunter
furious.
TV.
First for taking in John Ross,
Hastang
and
TV.
second for refusing to give them up. The attacks at the toboggan slide at her house had been designed to frighten her by threatening
Just
harm to
Judy
those she
TV.
cared about. She was
Just
willing to
Judy
believe
Vlog.
that killing Bennett was intended to serve the same purpose. She was angry and unsettled when she pulled into her driveway and climbed out of the car. The first few snowflakes were beginning to trickle out of the sky, and the light had gone darker, even in the time it had taken her to drive to the hospital and back. Another storm was on the way. She hoped it would come soon. She hoped it would trap everyone inside their homes, demons included, for weeks. Inside, she found John Ross checking the last of the locks on the doors and windows.
Tapos si
A job she had left
Happiness.
him to complete in her absence after informing him of Pig's efforts at
Lily's
implementing
Happiness.
an early
Tapos,
warning system.
Baby
When
Nona.
she told him about Bennett Scott, he just shook his head wordlessly. Mike, the electrician, had been
Ay, done na daw si Minglong sa
She glanced
Cloud
at the
Center
Barbara
TV.
Elizabeth
Done na.
sitting cross-legged in front of the Christmas tree, playing.
Okay.
Colored tree lights
Wait a
reflected
minute.
off the mylar ribbons and paper wrapped about the scattering of presents nestled behind them. The scene had the look of a Hallmark card. She walked into the kitchen and found the message light blinking on the
Wala.
answer phone. There were two messages. Both had come in this morning. The first was
Ayan na.
from Paul. Hi, it's me again. Just following up yesterday's call. Looks like I missed you, but I'll keep trying. Been thinking about you. Keep a good thought for me, and I'll talk with you later. Happy holidays. The familiar sound of his voice made her both smile and ache. She found herself wanting to talk with him too. Just hearing those few words stirred memories and feelings that hadn't surfaced for a long time. Maybe it was because she was so lonely. Maybe it was because she missed what they once had more than she was willing to admit. She closed her eyes a moment, picturing his face, then played the second message. It was a phone number. That was all. But she recognized the voice instantly. The good feelings went away, and she stared at the phone for a long moment before punching in the number. Miss Freemark, Fendo Gasp said when he picked up the receiver on the other end. No hesitation, no greeting. Why don't you just give me what I want, and we can put an end to this business? Even knowing he would be there, she felt a jolt go through her at the sound of his voice. It would be the easiest thing to do, wouldn't it? She replied. She was surprised at how calm she sounded, given what she was feeling. Maybe you could avoid any more unpleasantness, he suggested pointedly. Maybe no one else would walk off.
I don't know. I can open the video of
Maybe you wouldn't find any more surprises
her
hiding in
house.
the basement.
Lily's Happiness. I cannot
Could go
open.
back to the way it used to be.
It's hard to.
She shook her head at the receiver. I don't think so. I don't think that's possible
Here.
anymore. He chuckled
It's
softly,
okay now.
and she hated him so much she could barely keep from screaming it out.
And
Well,
then
life requires adapting to change, I guess. The trick is to adapt in the way least harmful to yourself and those around you. You haven't done very well with that of late, Miss Freemark. Your choices have cost you the lives of Bennett Scott and Ray Childress. They have resulted in your very nasty encounter with the Erdrop. What did you think of him, Miss Freemark? Would you like him to pay you another visit? He's very fond of children.
okay.
She took a deep breath. I'll be waiting for him next time, Mr. Gask. His visit might have a different ending. The
That's
gravelly
okay. I
voice
would love
purred.
to leave you now, but
Such
everyone can let
stubbornness
me
is foolish and
gift. I will
pointless.
check your
You can't
house.
win, Miss Freemark.
You have
Don't
my word.
think
Oh,
you
thank you.
can. Your allies are dropping away. Even that big Indian in the park. You've lost him, too. Her throat tightened as she felt her breath catch in shock. Two bears? No, they couldn't have done anything to him. Not him. She saw him in her mind. A rock, immovable, powerful. Obolish Amina. No, not him. She would know. I can tell you don't believe me, Fendo Gask said quietly. Suit yourself. What you believe or don't believe changes nothing. He's gone. And he's not coming.
Hi.
Is Mr. Ross?
How to pronounce this?
How about that little silver
Pablat.
who lives in the
Hi
park?
sa'yo.
You're pretty fond of him,
Pablat.
aren't you?
Him.
What do you
Him.
think about the Erdrop taking him?
Welcome.
She placed the receiver gently back in its cradle, and the hateful
You're done in. Sabi ni ni Minglong, done na daw siya ni Lily's Happiness. Hi sa'yo. You have another visitors. I give you jacket.
But nothing happened. Finally, she turned away. She would survive only if she kept her head, stay busy, take things one at a time, anticipate what might happen without overreaching, and she might have a chance. Vindo Gas could talk about making choices and suffering consequences all he wanted. She had made up her mind the moment she had seen Bennett Scott's
Drop
head
your house.
that she wasn't giving up the gypsy morph and his magic to the demons, no matter what happened.
I give you already jacket, Pavlot. Him. Ano? Him?
She didn't know what her decision might end up costing her, but she did know the cost of capitulating now was too great to live with. Her resolve surprised
Ano
her.
ba ba?
It wasn't that she was brave or that she believed in the power of right over wrong. She knew Vindo Gas was correct about her. She was being unreasonably stubborn. But somewhere along the way, since last night's events, she supposed, she had decided that whatever happened to her, or even to those around her, she wouldn't
Si
back down.
baby.
Something important was
Ano ba yun?
happening here. And even if she didn't
Baby
understand
Nona.
exactly what it was, she would fight
Baby
for it.
Nona. Wait a
She
minute.
had an overpowering conviction that in this instance, fighting was necessary, and that she must do so no matter what the
Yan siya, Baby
consequences.
Nona.
John Ross would understand, she believed. Certainly, he had waged similar battles over the years, championing causes when the issues weren't entirely clear to him, believing that instinct would guide him to make the right decisions when reason wasn't enough. She glanced out the window into the park. She would have to warn Pick of Gask's threat, although Pick was probably being pretty careful already. But even if Ogolish Amina couldn't stand against the demons, what chance did the Sylvan have? Or any of them, for that matter? She couldn't imagine anyone being stronger than Two Bears. She couldn't believe that he might be gone. She put aside her thoughts on the last of the Sinisippi and walked into the living room. Harper and Little John were still playing. She smiled at Harper when the little girl looked up. "Come talk to me a minute, sweetie," she said gently. She took Harper down the hall to her grandfather's den and shut the door behind them. She led Harper over to the big leather recliner that old Bob had favored for reading and cogitating and naps, sat down and pulled the child onto her lap. "When I was little, my grandfather would always bring me into this room and put me on his lap in this chair when he had something important to tell me," she began, cradling Harper in her arms. "Sometimes he wanted to talk about our family. Sometimes he wanted to talk about friends. If I did something wrong, he would bring me in here to explain why I shouldn't do it again."
Yes, I am now watching you.
"Harper, be bad? No, sweetie.
Minglong said, like
I didn't bring
that,
you in here because I
Pavlat.
did
Just
something
know
bad.
that.
But something bad has happened to Mommy, and I have to tell you about it. I don't want to, because
Drop
it's
your
not very
house,
sad.
Pavlat,
But sometimes
so
things
that
happen that make
Minglong
us sad.
can get
There
you.
isn't anything we can do about it." She exhaled wearily and began to stroke Harper's long hair. "Harper, Mommy is
Yeah.
home, sweetie." Harper went still. She got very sick, and she isn't coming home. She didn't want to
Thank
get
you
sick.
very
I know
much.
that. "Mommy's sick," hissed Bitterlip. "No, sweetie, not anymore. Mommy died, honey. Mommy died. You understand, Harper? Mommy's gone. She's in heaven with all the angels she used to tell you about, the ones who make the sun bright with all the love that mommies have for their babies. She asked me to take care of you, sweetie. You and I are going to live together right here in this house for as long as you want. You can have your own room and
I'm
your own
gonna.
toys. You can be my little girl. I would like that very much." Harper's lip was quivering. "Okay, Nest gave her a hug and held her tight. "Your mommy
Thank you
loved
very
so
much
Harper.
for
She
the
loved you
visit.
more than anything. She didn't want to die. She wanted to stay with you always, but she couldn't. She She looked out the window into the park, where the hazy light was fading toward darkness. Did you know that my mommy died when I was a little girl too? I was even younger than you are.
I'm done also to you,
Honesty,
Pablat.
Harper sobbed. I know, sweetie, I know. Nest stroked her hair slowly. I wanted to see my mommy too, and I couldn't. But if I close my eyes, I can see her there in the darkness inside my head. Can you do that? Close your eyes and think of mommy.
You're very, very, very welcome too.
See mommy, she said softly. She'll always be there, Harper, wherever you look for her. Mommies have to go away sometimes, but they leave a picture of themselves inside your head so you won't forget them. Harper's head lifted away from her breast. Does little John got a mommy yet? Nest hesitated, then smiled reassuringly. He's got you and me, Harper. We're his mommies. We have to take care of him, okay? Harper nodded solemnly, wiping at her eyes with her shirt sleeve. Harper want an apple juice, Ned. Nest stood her on her feet and put her hands on the little girl's shoulders.
Very complete that I give it to you, Pablat.
Let's go get some for little John, too. She leaned forward and kissed Harper's forehead. I love you, Harper. Love you, Ned. Harper answered back, dark eyes brilliant and denseless and filled with wonder. Nest took her hand.
Thank you very much, guy, for visiting to my house.
Crying. In that moment, she felt as if her heart was breaking. But she couldn't tell if it was from sadness or joy.
This ends side 2 of cassette 7 of Angel Fire East. Angel Fire East, cassette 8.
Chapter 23. While Nest spoke with Harper Scott in the den, John Ross stood at the living room entry watching little John play with the pieces of his puzzle. Sitting in front of the Christmas tree, the boy picked up the pieces one at a time and studied them. He seemed to be constructing the puzzle in his mind rather than on
Very
the board,
fun.
setting each piece back when he was done looking at it, not bothering
I'm
with
still
trying to find
watching.
the way in which it fit with the others. He seemed to be imitating what he had seen Harper doing a couple of days earlier. His blue eyes were intense with concentration, luminous within the oval of
Dogs,
his pale
cat.
face. He had lost color over the last 24 hours. There was a hollowness and a frailty about him that suggested he was not well. Of course, little John was only a shell created to conceal the life force that lay beneath, and any outward indication of illness might be symptomatic of something entirely different from what it appeared. Little John was not a real boy after all, but a creature of magic. Yet sitting there as he was, lost in thought, so deeply focused on whatever mind game he was engaged in, that he was oblivious to everything else. He seemed as real as any child Ross had ever known. Were gypsy morphs really so different from humans? Little John
Hello guys.
felt in his body
May bago tayong si Sabongerang Vlog.
their spirits
Minglong, may bago tayo Minglong, si Sabongerang Vlog.
and flamed the latter.
Hello sa'yo. Shout out sa'yo.
Some people believed it was so.
Marami na dyan.
He didn't know why he believed it.
Dut-dutin mo na.
Suppose his belief had
Andiyan na sa
developed
taas yung
years
iba.
after the word, and had
May bago tayo, si
that the word
si Pablat, si Minglong,
that they were antagonists,
si
and that the timeline of human evolution was their chosen
sino
battleground.
pa ba to?
Maybe he believed it simply because
Si Happiness, meron din si Lilis Happiness,
struggle required it of him. Regardless,
si Lok Minglong, legit yan.
humans and gypsy
Dikitan mo na.
possessed a spiritual essence that lived on
Tapos
after their bodies were gone. He leaned on his staff over.
Sino pa ba yun? Si Justin Jude. Kitan mo na yan.
Inescapable and unpleasant fact that time was
Nasa taas na kasi sila eh.
whatever else was to happen to little John Ness Harper, that time was
Nasa taas na kasi sila eh.
whatever else was to happen to little John Ness Harper and himself, it should not be invited to happen here. Ness might wish to remain
Si Lilis Happiness. Dikitan mo na yan.
in a familiar place. He might believe that the Sylvan pick could spin a protective web
Mga
of
legit
magic
yan
about
sila.
her interest so that she could not act by surprise. But John
Bisaya
was
din yan.
convinced
Tapos si Bibi Nona. Dikitan mo yan.
out of there.
Mus-
The old grandfather clock tick-tock in the silence, finding in its measured beat a reminder of how ineffectual he had been in his use of the time allotted him. He knew what was required if he was to resolve the secret of the morph. He had known if it brought him to Nest Freemark.
Minglong. Tapos na daw si Minglong.
Believed it wanted
Sa Bongerang Vlog, she said she was already done to you.
and intuitive, but her conclusion
She is also legit Minglong.
and might be misguided. So much of her thinking was speculative. How much was generated by wishful thinking and raw emotion?
Bakas, kalimbang, dikit. Para hindi tayo mapalo ni Lolo. Yan ang mga importante. Yan ang mga importante. Minglong, dana daw si dana si sa Bongerang Vlog. Shout out sa iyo, Minglong, dana si sa Bongerang Vlog.
Matter carefully. It might be that there was a problem because the ghost
Sabi kasi ni Minglong kanina, guhitan na dikitan daw siya kasi babalik siya maya.
morphs and the ability to be.
Kanina pa kasi siya
Was it something about the
nabingwit na yung iba. Madami pa dyan. Bingwitin mo na. Kay mga legit yan. Mga kaibigan ko yan.
magic competing with its own in some way?
Ay, sorry.
Questions through. This boy.
Si Lilis Happiness.
Closed away and so
Legit din yan.
inscrutable.
Tapos si Just Judy. Legit din yan. Si Winona. Legit din yan. Si... Kalang, mayroon pa dito eh. Marami to.
From the morph's last final evolution into Little John.
Si Hastang TV. Legit din yan. Bisaya din yan.
Before they're coming here,
Mag-iwan ka lang ng bakas at babalikan ka niyan.
what of the staff? What was the gypsy morph looking for?
Pati yan si Just Judith Vlog.
Find in the woman
Legit din yan.
had spoken with such need. The door to the den opened and Nest
Si Hastang TV. Legit yan.
neither said anything as they passed him and went into the kitchen. Ross followed them with his eyes, keeping silent himself.
Si Lilis Happiness. Legit yan. Legit na legit yan.
Nest poured apple juice into Harper's
Bisaya po na.
and gave it to her, then poured a cup for Little John
Saan na ba
and
tong
carried
iba?
it to the living room.
Si Bibi.
After her,
Si Bibi Nona. Legit na legit din yan.
working the puzzle anew. Nest was bending down to help, speaking to them in a low voice. When the phone rang, she remained where she was, kneeling on the floor, Harper on one side and Little John on the other. John, she called without looking up. Could you get that, please? He crossed the hall to the kitchen phone and picked up the receiver. Freemark residence. I guess this just goes to prove how shameless I am, chasing after someone who leaves without a
Yung dalawa nating bisita, hindi yan mga
Pag kinabi ko kasi maglalagay.
hindi yan taga sa atin. Ibang lugar yan sila pero legit yan kasi ko yan. Ibigan ko yan.
You look so peaceful, I decided not to wake you. That's probably why you decided not to call this morning either. You wanted to let me sleep in. Things have been a bit hectic around here. He considered how much he ought to tell her, then lowered his voice. Bennett Scott disappeared last night. They found her this morning at the bottom of the cliffs in Mississippi Park. Oh, John. Nest just finished telling Harper. It's hard to know how she's going to deal with this. I think Nest is trying to find out. Should I come over? He hesitated. Let me tell Nest you offered.
I-scroll mo sa taas, marami ka madikitan. Tapos sabihin mo lang na nadikitan mo na sila. Sayang yan, mga legit yan.
Even though he was telling her the truth and badly wanted to. He had already determined what he must do. He must leave Hopewell and leave quickly. With little John and Nest and Harper in tow. Maybe he could come back when this business with the gypsy morph was over. Maybe he could stay forever then. Maybe he and Josie could have a chance at a life. But maybe not. He was reminded anew of what had happened several months earlier when they returned to Wales and the Fairy Glen.
Pablot, ano daw, dikit na daw.
Reminded anew of
He is done to you, Pablot.
It was early October when the tatterdemalion came to him. He was still living in Cannon Beach with Mrs. Staples and working at the Cannon Beach bookstore. Through help from Anson Rawlington, he had discovered the cave in which the gypsy morph would appear and had returned there many times to prepare for the event. He had memorized the cave's layout and begun thinking of how he might trap the morph when it appeared. But he was still unable to conceive of a way in which to snare this elusive creature. He was hoping his dream of the night on the cross would come again and show him something new. He was marking time. The tatterdemalion appeared to him when he woke from a different dream, a particularly bad one, a dream in which he had witnessed another city's demise and the slaughter of its inhabitants. He could not remember the city's name, which troubled him considerably. He could not even remember which part of the country it was located in. There were people in the dream whose names and faces he knew, but on waking he could remember none of them. He had been fighting on a roadway leading out of the city a group of women and children and old people under his protection and care. He had gotten them clear of the city, but they couldn't travel fast enough to stay ahead of their pursuers. Finally, Ross had been forced to turn and fight. Once
Pablot,
demons quickly surrounded
sa Bungera Shed, she is already done to you.
Ross was still engaged in a desperate attempt to break free when he awoke. For a moment, he could not remember where he was. His head still swam with images from the dream, and the sounds of battle rang in his ears. It was a warm, windless night, strayed somehow from the summer gone, and the windows to his bedroom were open to the air. The tatterdemalion stood by the window closest to the sea, pale and vaguely iridescent, a child of indeterminate sex, very young, with lost, haunted eyes that reflected bits and pieces of a human life, best forgotten. "Are you John Ross?" it asked in a soft, high voice. Ross blinked and nodded, remembering his situation, the remnants of his dream beginning to fade. "Yes." "I have a message for you from the lady. She would speak with you. She wishes you to come to her." "To the Fairy Glen?" he asked quickly, sitting up now. The tatterdemalion shivered faintly. "She wishes you to come at once." "To the Fairy Glen?" he repeated. But the tatterdemalion was already fading, its luminescence failing, its lines erasing, its presence turning to memory. In seconds, it had disintegrated entirely, and Ross was alone once more. He caught a flight out of Portland the next afternoon, flew east to New York, changed planes at Kennedy, and by midday of the following day he was landing in Heathrow. From there he took a train to Cardiff, then rented a car and drove north to Betasicoy. The trip cost him most of what he had earned that summer at the bookstore. He had barely managed to throw together the clothes he needed before going out the door. He was disorganized and exhausted on his arrival, and while his instincts
Lily's happiness.
his body
Sa Bungera Shed, she was finished to you.
bed and slept 10 hours. When he awoke, dream haunted but better able to make the decisions that might be required of him. He showered, dressed, and ate lunch in the pub downstairs. Afterward, on a typical Welsh October day, mostly cloudy, some brief rain showers interspersed with glimpses of sun, and a hint of early winter muddy paths. The glen was green and lush, a stream that meandered along its floor, swollen from recent rains. Ross descended the trail from the upper road cautiously, taking his time, placing his staff carefully for support. The familiar sounds filled him with excitement and hope. The tumble of the waterfall, the rush of the stream, the whisper of wind through the leaves, and the bird song. He breathed in the dank rawness of the earth and plants, the rich smell laced with the fragrances of wildflowers and greenery. It was startling how much he felt at peace here, how close to everything that grew about him, as if this was where he really belonged now, as if this was his home. He knew he would not see the lady or the fairy creatures that served her in daytime. He thought he
Lili sa...
might see
Ay, sorry.
Linder, the familiar
Lili sa
guise,
Pinis.
but it didn't really matter if Linder
Sabongera said she's done to you.
he had come just to see the glen in daylight, to feel once again the lure of this place that had
Minglong, Sabongera said she's done to you
He
too.
descended to its floor and sat on the rocks, looking off at the waterfall and the stream, and the trees and plants and tiny wildflowers, and nothing in particular at all, just the sweep of the hollow and the colors that imbued it. After a while, he went back to the inn and took a short nap. When he woke again, he walked around the tiny village, then returned for dinner. The innkeeper remembered him from his last visit, and they talked for a time about upheaval and unpredictability in the larger world. Benesacoid was an island of tranquility and constancy, and it offered a sense of reassurance to its inhabitants. The innkeeper had lived in the village all his life. He couldn't understand why anyone would want to live anywhere else. An hour before midnight, Ross returned to the fairy glen.
Ah, dito di kag bukid gikan.
And starless, and the moon peeped through the clouds like an intruder. Ross parked and walked to the gate, then descended halfway to the glen.
Mao di ay.
The damp air was chilly.
Kuanin na lang natanan na diha.
Into his heavy coat and watched his
Daghan panawan nimo ba dikit eh. Kuan na pangitaa diha na daghan pa na. Wa nimo duha pa man nimong nadikitan.
and stood looking around.
Kuan kalang ha otrohon.
Night smells and listened to the soft rush of the falls. Almost immediately, Owen
Si Bibi Nona nadikitan mo na.
once and servant to the lady now. He stood
Sa bungera nadikitan mo na ba si Bibi Nona?
wrapped about his lean body, his wide, flat-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He held his fishing pole loosely, the line curved away into the flowing waters. He nodded amiably toward Ross. "'Tis a good night for watching fairies," he said quietly.
Tapos si Hastang TV, dikitan mo na yan. Si Hastang TV, legit yan.
It's true. It was a part of the reason he was here. Wait a minute, Penelope.
Si Hastang TV, tapos si
Your eyes
Just Judy, dikitan mo rin yan. Babalikan ka niyan.
who believe can always
Legit talaga yan. Yung nandito, mga legit talaga.
slightly and his face lifted out of the shadows. Ross saw himself in that face, his features more closely mirrored than when he had encountered his ancestor last. He was older, of course, so their ages were closer, but it was more than that. It was as if by living lives as knights of the word, their resemblance to each other had increased. Owen Linder began moving slowly downstream from Ross. He stopped once, casting his line anew.
Huwag ka magsulat ng sa bungera, yung isang litrang dito.
When he looked back again,
Mapindot tayo ni lolo niyan. Bawal yan. Ako ng Irison.
the glen's darkness was hard and cold about it.
Di pwede yung isang words mo doon.
It enfolded and welcomed him. It gave him peace. That had not been so on his last visit, when he had returned 10 years earlier to tell the lady he could no longer serve as a knight of the word. The glen had felt hostile and forbidding then. It had disdained him. lady had not appeared, and he had gone home disconsolate and frustrated in his efforts. He had lost his way without knowing it. As a consequence, he had almost died. Light twinkled
Matanggal ang ating mga lagas, ang ating mga bahay.
hundreds of them appeared at once, as if tiny fireflies migrated out
Bawal yan ni Lolo.
to welcome him home. He smiled at the
Ang
sight
bilis pa naman ni Lolo. Ang mata ni Lolo, napakabilis.
comes to him, acknowledging his presence. They grew in number until they filled the waterfall with their light, and Ross thought he would never see anything so wonderful again. Then he heard his name called softly. John Ross.
Oo, yung isang ano doon, bawal yon.
Surely as he did the very
Tapos pag maano tayo ni Lolo, wala. Malagas ang ating mga buhok.
I am here. She was standing where Owen Glinter had disappeared, balanced on the surface of the water, suspended on air. She was as young and beautiful and ephemeral as ever, almost not there in the paleness of light that defined her image. She lifted her arms toward him, and the light moved with her, cloaking her in silver, trailing after her in bright streamers. She advanced in an effortless floating motion, a shifting figure of shadows and moonlight. My brave knight errant, she whispered as she drew close. You have done well in my service. You are the image of your ancestor in more than appearance. You carry his blood in your veins, and his
Oh, ako ray bahala. Ako na dali-dalion kay kananaang maapil po kung kalagasan.
but you reflect anew what was best in him. He was shaking,
Malagas po ng imo, malagas po ng ako ah.
nothing he could readily define, but simply because she was so close to him that he could feel her presence.
Lisod ra ba jud kay mamingwit niya lagason ra kadto ganing unan. 80 ka buok ang nawala sa ako ah.
She whispered through silky blackness and shimmering light. Brave knight, your service is almost ended.
Kinaabtikan.
Must you do
Mao nang dali-dalion jud ako kuan kay
set you free?
mao tong nangutana ko og
What he was hearing.
mano man tong daghana naman taw tagikuha niya. Jesus kay nga na man di ay hingon tong amiga nga nagakuan na dugay na kaayo nga gaingani.
10 years earlier,
Ay sus nga na man din na siya og samot na kanang mga dagkong litra di po na pwede.
without even being asked,
Kanang mga emoji di po na pwede.
you must return to
Naabtikan.
the appearance of the gypsy boy. She told him, as in your dream, it will come. As foretold, it will appear. When it does, you must be ready. For the time allotted to it, you must protect it from the void. You must protect it at all costs. It is precious to me, and you
Ah,
must
perting estriktuha.
when it is transformed for the final time, your service
Bawo po na si Lolo nga arang majud ka
then you may come home.
kuan.
He could barely comprehend what he was being told. His voice failed him when he tried to speak. The words would not form in his mouth. Give me your hand, she instructed. Without thinking, he knelt at her approach, lifting his hand to touch hers. All that she was,
Mao mo po istorya nila na ho.
filled
Nga nga na lagi daw.
and determination. He felt something pressed into his hand, and when her own withdrew, he found himself holding a gossamer neck. You will use this to the creature you seek. Use this to the creature you seek. When it appears,
Oh, mao lagi.
the gypsy morph will be yours then, to care for, to protect, and to shepherd as a newborn lamb. The lady lifted her arm to sweep the air with light.
Naman bugod po ko yung mga kaibigan nga nagainganit, taga-buhol pod.
Great heart,
Kuan na sila, mga dagko nag mga kuan.
no matter how strong
Dagko na kaadtong mga balay. Mao po na nag-ingon na ho.
I will. He said, the words coming almost unbidden, his voice returned. Rise.
Mao man gani po gatudlo na ho ngani sila man po nagtudlo na ho. Sa una di ko kamao unsa nang ilapag ng bahay ganyan.
As do I,
Sila po nagtudlo na ho.
and serve us well.
Oh, maglikay jud kay sayang ka jud. Sos
The very
gihaguan nimo gipuyatan.
glass of her neck that would stare the gypsy morph.
Halos
Resolving that he would do what was
sige lang kag kananaang
finally his time of
pang
service might be.
pangisda unya mawara.
It was only later, when he was back at Cannon Beach, awaiting Thanksgiving and the gypsy morph's coming, that he began to ponder more closely the lady's words. And only in the past few days, as time began to narrow down and the demons close about,
Bawg tinuod ba pud nga ingon po tong akong amiga sa Japan nga karon kunong sunod tuig magsugod kuno karong Enero ba to?
Josie's voice spoke suddenly through the receiver, interrupting his reverie.
Kuan kuno kananaang
I want you to say so if you just
5,000 na kuno ang
feel better, certainly, and not because you think it's the
kuano ni Lolo unya 5,000 kuno pud pareho ng 5,000 tanan.
brushed aside his thoughts.
Unsaon naman na pagkuha? Kinalisuran.
Because it's
Galisod mo ganita ng 1,000 kana pagka 5,000.
tonight.
Ag oras
If I can,
5,000.
he took a deep breath. I want to
Oh, mo ingon ang katunghong kuan sa taga Japan.
a lot of things, but you were right last night. I didn't come back for that. I'm not in a position to promise anything. Not yet.
Lisod kaayo. Daghan na siya kuan ron.
Change.
Gingnan bitaw ko tunghong kuan sa Japan nga
I hope for it more.
kanana ang kuan na ng porsigiha dyan ng imo para di ka maabtan og kuan kay
He stood
mao labo po na mao po nag-istorya po niya kadto pong iyahang mga kuan nga
hawk-eye
mao lagi kuno nay balita
back of the house, saw
ang iyaha kong giingnan.
way into the living room. But
Asa makuha kinalisuran. Lisod gani ng
little John and lay down,
kanang pagpangisda di kaadyo lisod kanang oras may kinalisuran.
stroking him.
Gilaliman magukag oras aron taasa. Pero ug mangisda kag 5,000 lisod na kaadyo.
Josie said,
Galisod gani kusang libo.
voice caught. Big surprise, huh? But I had to say it at least once. Funny it didn't hurt a bit. Call me later, okay? She hung up before he could say anything. He stared at the phone for a moment, listening to the dial tone.
Ara lisura na na eh.
The receiver back in its cradle. The ache he felt inside was bittersweet, and it left him wanting a resolution he couldn't have. He should call her back. He should tell her he loved her too. But he knew he wouldn't. He was still mulling the matter when he caught a glimpse of movement through the kitchen window. When he walked over for a closer look, a sheriff's cruiser was parked in the driveway.
Sige kayo napa man ka kay trabaho.
Walking toward the house.
Nag naminaw pa man gupuro yung usare kayo po kumatug kay di apo manehong bana nagatanaw pa.
Chapter 24.
Yang libro nagsige istorya.
Just from the look on John Ross's face, yes,
Tulog na.
it was even before she
Ako lang ilapag ng imong bayog kuan ikaw ray bahala og kanang kuan ha.
with Larry's
Balik nila para
the forefront of her
di
thoughts,
ta makuan.
but she forced herself to ignore them. This visit did not concern her. It concerned Bennett Scott.
Balikan lang nimo
To talk with him
akong
about
ilapag
Bennett
ng imong
Scott
kuan.
anyway. She was prepared to endure the unpleasantness she was certain would follow. Afternoon, he greeted as she opened the door. Would it be all right with you if I took those statements now? As if she had a choice. She managed a weak smile. Sure, come on in.
Sige.
He clumped through the open doorway.
Ako lang kang ikuan, ako kang
Son of the throw rug.
ako akang kalingawan og lapag og na mamalik na to sila.
He seemed ill at ease.
Good night.
Size and authority were out of place here, as if they belonged somewhere else entirely and not in her home. She felt better for this, thinking that it wouldn't hurt for him to walk on eggshells for a while. Our Brewster finished the autopsy, he advised conspiratorially. door open just a crack, anxious that Harper not hear what might be said. She took him back down the hall to where Ross was waiting.
Dikit-dikit na guys.
Together in the living room. Ross and Nest on the couch, Spence in the easy chair.
Good night sa'yo sa bungera.
Jotted a few notes and then asked Nest to begin. She did so without preamble, detailing the events from the time of their departure from the house until her discovery at Roberts that Bennett was missing. She left out anything about Ross, preferring to let him tell his own story. She
Isang
also left out
milyones
anything about
lang
her,
guys.
saying instead that she had come back to find the house broken into and the power at home now. When she finished her account, she brought out the note that Bennett had left in her coat the night before. I forgot about this earlier, but I found it this morning before you called. Bennett must have tucked it in my pocket last night before she slipped out of the Hepler's. She handed it to Spence, who read it carefully. Almost sounds as if she thought something was going to happen to her, he said, mostly to himself. He cleared his throat and shifted to a new position. Just one or two more questions, then I'll take Mr. Ross's statement and be on my way.
Dikit na guys.
He ended up asking rather a lot of questions, she thought, repeating himself more than once in the process and annoying her.
Nangisda pa ba kayo?
But she stuck it out, not wanting to have to go through this again later. Once or twice, she got up to peek down the hallway, and each time, Larry Spence quickly called her back by saying he was almost done, that he had just a few more questions, as if he was afraid she was going to walk out on him and not come back. When he was finished with her, he interviewed Ross, a process
Dikitan nyo na
that all the points
guys.
he made earlier about drug connections and shady characters took considerably less time than it had with her. He raised an eyebrow when Josie Jackson was mentioned, but said nothing. If she hadn't known better, she would have thought he'd lost interest in Ross completely. Guess that's it, he announced finally, checking his watch for what must have been the 20th time, slapping closed the notebook and rising to his feet. Sorry to take so long. He was still nervous as Nest walked him to the front door, glancing everywhere but at her, looking as if he had something bottled up inside that he was dying to get out. At the door, he gave her a peek at what it was. Look, I don't want you to get the wrong idea, girl, but I'm worried about you staying here. He seemed uncertain about where to go with this, his head lowered, his deputy sheriff's hat in his hands. There's things about this investigation that you don't know. Things I can't do. Not really. He nodded some more. I suppose not. It's pretty complex, even to me. But you got yourself in the middle of something, girl.
Dikit-dikit na guys. Asaan na ba kayo? Dikit na kayo.
I know how you feel, but you don't know how I feel. She exploded. And if you want my honest opinion,
Dikit-dikit na guys.
if this has to do with that old man in the black coat with the leather book, I'm telling you for the last time, stay away from him. Don't listen to anything he says, and don't do anything he tells you to do. He's dangerous, Larry. Trust me. You don't want anything to do with him. Larry Spence screwed up his face and straightened his shoulders. He's FBI, Nest. He hissed softly. She looked at him as if he had just climbed out of a spaceship. No, Larry, he isn't. He's not one of the good guys. He's not your friend, and he's certainly not mine. He's not anything he seems to be. Have you checked up on him? Have you asked for proof of who he claims to be from someone else? Don't tell me how to do my job, please. Well, maybe someone should. Look, do yourself a favor. Call Washington or whoever. Make sure. Because you know what? It's entirely possible that old man is responsible for what happened to Bennett. You're way out of line, girl. Spence was suddenly agitated, combative. You don't know any of this. You're just saying it to protect Ross. I'm saying it to protect you. His face flushed dark red. You think I'm stupid? You think I can't see what's going on? You and Ross are... He caught himself, but it was too late. She knew exactly what it was going to say next. Her mouth tightened. "Get out, Larry," she ordered, barely able to contain her fury. "Right now, and don't come back." He swept past her with a grunt and went out the door, slamming it behind him. She watched him stomp back to his cruiser, climb in, and drive off. She was so angry she kept watching until he was out of sight, half afraid he might change his mind and try to come back. When the phone rang, she was still seething. She stalked into the kitchen and snatched up the receiver. "Hello? Nest? Hi. You sound a little out of sorts. Did I pick a bad time to call?" She exhaled sharply. "Paul? Yeah, are you okay?" She brushed back her curly hair. "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." She nodded at the wall, looking out the window at the empty drive. "Sorry, I just had a visitor who rubbed me the wrong way. How are you?" "I'm good." He sounded relaxed, comfortable. She liked hearing him like this. "You got my earlier messages, right?" "I did. Sorry I didn't call back before, but I've been pretty busy. I have some guests for the holiday inn." She ran out of anywhere to go with this, so she simply left the sentence hanging. "Well, it's been hectic." "That's the holidays for you. More trouble than they're worth sometimes, especially when you have a house full." "It's not so bad," she lied. "If you say so. Anyway, how would you feel about having another guest? Maybe sometime after the first of the year?" She couldn't tell him how much she wanted that, how much she needed to see him. She was surprised at the depth of the feeling he invoked in her. She knew it was due in part to her present circumstances, to the loneliness and uncertainty she was feeling, to her heightened sense of mortality and loss. She knew as well that she still had strong feelings for Paul. The part of her had never really given up on him. The part of her wanted him back. "I'd like that." She smiled and almost laughed. "I'd like that very much." "Me too. I've missed you. Seems like a million years since I've seen you. Well, since anyone's seen you for that matter." His voice turned light, bantering. "Good old Hopewell, refuge for ex-Olympians. I can't believe you're still there. Seems like the wrong place for you after all you've done with your life. You still train regularly, Nest?" "Sure, a little." "Thinking about competing in the next Olympics?" She hesitated, confused. "Not really, no." "Well, either way, you've got a great story to tell, and my editor will pay a lot for it. We can talk about your career, memories, old times, flesh it out with what's happening now. I can use an old picture of you or have the photographer take a new one. It's your choice. But you might get the cover, so a new one makes sense."
This ends side 1 of cassette 8. Please turn.
She shook her head in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Of the magazine, the cover. I want to do a story on you while I'm visiting. Mix a little business with pleasure. It makes sense. Everybody wants to know what's happened to you since the last Olympics. Who can tell your story better than me? We can work on it in our spare time. They'll pay a pretty good fee for this, Nest. It's easy money." All the breath went out of her lungs, and she went cold all over. "You want to do a story on me?" she asked quietly, remembering the editor from Paul's magazine she had hung up on a month or so earlier. He laughed. "Sure, I'm a journalist for most. I just thought it would be nice if..." She placed the receiver back in its cradle and severed the connection. She stood where she was, staring down at the phone, unable to believe what had just happened. A story. He wanted to see her so he could do a story, and the magazine editor put him up to it, and he thought he could get to her through Paul. Tears flooded her eyes. She fought to hold them in, then gave up. She walked to where Ross couldn't see her and cried silently. The phone rang again, but she didn't answer it. She stood alone in a corner and wished everything and everyone would just go away. It took outside. The day was fading quickly toward darkness, and snow was beginning to fall once more in a soft white curtain. Street lamps and porch lights glimmered up and down Woodlawn Road, and Christmas tree lights twinkled through frosted windows and along railings and eaves. On a snow-covered lawn across the way, a painted wooden nativity scene was bathed in white light. Ross appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Are you all right?" Everybody's favorite question. She nodded without looking at him. "Just disappointed." The phone rang again. This time she picked it up. "Look, Paul," she began. "Nest, it's Larry Spence." She heard him breathing hard in the receiver as if he had run a race. His voice was breaking. "I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry, that's all. I'm sorry. I know you'll probably never speak to me again, but Robinson is right. We can't take chances with this business." "You're not thinking straight, girl. If you were, you'd see how much danger you're in, and you'd get the hell out of there. I'm just doing what I have to do, nothing more, but I'm sorry it had to be me, because I know you." "Go away, Larry," she said, and hung up. She stared at the phone absently. What was he talking about? She had no idea, but his tone of voice bothered her. He sounded anxious, almost frantic, apologizing like that over and over for asking a few boring questions. Then, suddenly, unexpectedly, nestled comfortably in the corners and draped the bed in broad
Ay,
sprays. The puzzle
shout out
toy
sa'yo,
displayed
Jaylon.
farmer's cup of apple
Good
juice
evening,
and
good
half-empty
evening.
ice
Nabigyan kitang jacket. Di ko napansin
the
eh.
children were gone.
Ayun na, may jacket ka na.
Chapter 25. At first, she could not bring herself to move. She just
Shout out
stood
naman po
staring
sa'yo.
into the room, shocked into
Ayun na,
disbelief,
binigyan na kita ng
frozen with
jacket.
disbelief. A rush of confused thoughts crowded through her mind.
Isdain mo na yung mga yan, nandiyan dyan.
Something there herself. She just wasn't seeing them.
Mga legit yan.
Playing hide and seek, and she was supposed to come look for them. Maybe they were under the bed.
Ilapag mo na yung jacket, ay ilapag mo na yung bahay mo. Ayan na, binigyan na kita ng jacket.
Thinking was making her crazy.
Shout out sa'yo,
What she
Jelon.
would find. She searched under the bed and in the closet and anywhere else she could think to look. As she did, her shock dissipated and her anger began to grow.
Ay, nandiyan ka pala. Oo nga pala.
Her house was supposed to be protected. Nothing was supposed to be able to get
Ay,
inside
sakit
without
na
her
ng likod ko talaga.
It was the first time that Peggy
Ah.
broke down and she was furious at it. It wasn't until she reached the adjoining rooms, desperate by now for help from any quarter, that she discovered the window in Bennett's bedroom.
Shout out sa'yo. Salamat sa pagbisita, Jelon.
Began to make sense. She had left him alone in that bedroom while she had gone to fetch the children, and he had used the opportunity to open the window from the inside. Pick had warned
Good
her
evening
that
din
the
sa'yo.
safety net was
Salamat. Nakapasyal
Larry
ka.
was still under the sway of Findo gas, and he had given gas access without her knowing. He had come to her home specifically to help the demon steal the children. Worried by the silence, Ross came down the hallway to find her. It was he who found the damp outline of the footprint on the carpet. The footprint wasn't human. It resembled that of a large lizard, three-toed, clawed at the tip. The Erdrock took them, she realized at once. And now the demons had them. She wanted to curl up and die. She wanted to attack someone. She was conflicted and ravaged by her emotions, and it was all she could do to hold herself together as she stood with Ross in the darkened hallway and discussed the possibilities. Gas, Gaston, she insisted quietly, her voice hushed and furtive, as if the walls would convey her thoughts to those who shouldn't hear. Ross nodded.
Shout out sa'yo, Jelon.
Another shadow carved from the
Jelon
night that
live.
outside. He wants to trade for the morph. But he already has the morph. He doesn't realize that. If he did, he wouldn't have bothered with Harper. Ross was staring at her, green eyes locked on hers. He thinks we still have it hidden away somewhere. He's taken the children to force us to give it up. Nothing else has worked. Threats, attacks, breaking into the house. But he knows how you feel about the children. She thought again of the suspense. I was a fool, she said bitterly. She leaned against the wall, running her fingers through her curly hair. I should have seen this coming. Gask tried for the children last night. I just didn't realize what he was doing. I thought he was attacking them to scare me. He was trying to steal them. He was more subtle about it this time. John, what are we going to do? Wait. He started back down the hall for the living room. Gask will call. The demon did so, 15 minutes later. They were sitting in the kitchen by then, sipping a hot coffee and listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the silence. Outside, the darkness had chased west the last of the daylight and layered the snow-shrouded landscape. Street lamps and porch lights blazed bravely in the blackness, small beacons illuminating houses adrift in snowbanks and wreathed in icicles. Thick flakes of snow floated through their gauzy halos as the new storm slowly rolled up the plains. Good evening, Miss Freemark. Vindo Gask greeted pleasantly when she picked up the phone on the second ring. I have someone who would like to speak to you. There was a momentary pause. Harper said in a tiny, frightened voice. Vindo Gask came back on the line. No more games, Miss Freemark. Playtime is over. You lost. Give me what I want, or you won't see these children again, I promise you. Don't test me on this. I won't, she said quietly. Good. I don't know where you've hidden the morph, but I will give you until midnight to recover it. I will call you back then to arrange a time and place for the exchange. I will call only once. Any delay, any excuses, any tricks, and you and Mr. Ross will spend a very lonely Christmas. Do we understand each other? She closed her eyes. Yes. He hung up. She placed the receiver back in its cradle and looked at Ross. You were right, she said. He wants to trade the children for the morph. He nodded without speaking. Except we don't have the morph to give him. No, he agreed softly. We don't. Vindo Gask wrapped his fingers carefully about the book of names and stood staring off into empty space.
Asa na kayo, guys?
He couldn't put his finger on it, but something wasn't right. It wasn't in the situation, which was progressing just as he had planned, or in Nest Freemark's voice, which was suitably submissive and worried. No, it was something else, something he had overlooked. Gramps! Penny snapped at him impatiently. What did she say? It wouldn't come to him, so he put the matter aside for later consideration. She'll do what we want. Penny giggled and twirled about in mock celebration. Little Miss Track Shoes has run out of tricks. Too bad, too bad. No gold medal for her. Better luck next time. She danced around the room, frizzy red hair flying, gleefully singing, tra-la-la-la. She danced at Twitch, who just looked at her dumbly. Then at the Erdrock, where it crouched hidden in a corner. Gask waited her out patiently. Make the children some dinner, he said, when she had calmed down sufficiently to pay attention. Don't get cute, and don't frighten them. What's the difference? She asked, pouting. You'll kill them anyway. Why can't I have some fun with them first? Because I say so, Penny, he answered, giving her a steady look. Is that reason enough for you? The redhead's mouth twisted in a hard sneer. Sure enough, Gramps. Anything your little old heart desires. She disappeared, humming tunelessly, less easily controlled. If she went off, as she was certain to do sooner or later, he would have to kill her. Not that he was reluctant or resourceful, and their desperation would render them less predictable. Penny, he might have to agree to give her the children as a reward. She would like that. If she had his promise that she could have them when this was over, she was more likely to stay in line. It was a cheap enough price. The children were down in the basement in a big L-shaped recreation room containing an old Lionel train setup, a jukebox and bar, a game table and dartboard, and some couches and chairs situated around a television. There was only one way in or out, down a stairway leading from the back of the house, so it was easy to keep an eye on them. Nevertheless, he'd sent the Erdrock down to stand watch without their seeing it. Twitch and Penny were too scary and moralized. No one should be calling. He picked up the receiver guardedly. Yes? Mr. Robinson? It was that sheriff's deputy, what's his name, Spence. Findo Gask suppressed a grimace. What can I do for you? We need to talk. The sooner the better. Go ahead, Deputy Sheriff. Talk. No, not on the phone, in person. I just need to clarify a few things about what's going on with John Ross and this drug business. I'm worried about those kids. I want to make sure they're safe. Where can we meet? Findo Gask shook his head. Gask could tell by the way Spence spoke. He had been checking, and he had found out that no one knew anything about an FBI assignment in Hopewell or an agent named Robinson. Spence was scared. On Robinson's instructions, he had opened a bedroom window in the Freemark home so that the children could be removed for safekeeping, while a sting operation was implemented to collar the dangerous Mr. Ross. Spence was afraid he had facilitated the kidnapping of two children, aiding and abetting the commission of a felony, and he could see his entire career slipping away. What to do? I'm going to give you an address, Deputy Sheriff. Gask looked at Twitch, slumped on the sofa in front of the television, huge and vacant-eyed. I've been thinking that the children might be better off with the local authorities. If you could take them on, I would be grateful. We could talk then. Yeah, sure, that would be fine. Spence sounded relieved. Gask gave the deputy sheriff their address. He wasn't worried about Spence descending on him with an army of law enforcement officers. The deputy sheriff would be looking for a way to protect himself from any fallout in this business. If he could get the children back unharmed, things would be fine. That's the way he would look at it. He would come alone. Findo Gask hung up the receiver. A picture of how this business would end took shape. Newspaper headlines and television trailers scrolled through his mind. A family tragedy was sparked by jealousy and misunderstanding. Two men and a woman It would make for good reading in other cities. What are we going to do, John? Nest repeated, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. Ross lifted the kitchen counter with the aid of his staff and leaned his backside against the lower cabinets, crossing his arms over his chest, embracing the staff possessively. His lean face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes were fierce. There's something I haven't told you, he said after a moment's reflection. Not because I was trying to keep it from you or didn't trust you, but because it didn't have anything to do with you, except that now it does. I told you that a dream led me to the Gypsy Morph, but I didn't tell you what the dream was about. In the dream, a Knight of the Word was hung from a cross. Demons and once men had crucified him. He was dying. Just before I woke, I saw his face. It was my own. He held up one hand to cut short her startled exclamation. I wasn't sure at first if the knight on the cross was me, or if I was just supposed to see myself in him. I was hoping I would learn the answer from the lady when she summoned me to Wales 2 months ago. I didn't, but I learned something more important. I learned that if I was successful at protecting the Gypsy Morph, through its final transformation, I would be released forever from my commitment to the Word. John, she breathed. He nodded. I know. I fought so hard for it 10 years ago when it wasn't permitted, and then it's offered to me without my even having asked. I wanted asked, I'll admit that. I've seen too much living in both the present and the future. I'm tired of death and chaos and destruction. I'm tired of fighting to stay alive. Hell, I'm just plain tired. I've been a Knight of the Word for 25 years, half my life. It's all I can remember anymore. It seems like the only existence I've ever known. I need to give it up. I need to rest. But you can do that now.